This time our trash is beyond unimportant. This pussy-ass blonde boy is that annoying side character that every story has, and our protagonist is the helper of that trash. And when I say helper, I mean that he just fixes the shit this dude does around the city, like going around sleeping with every single girl. Despicable behavior for real. I would never do something so delicious if I was the son of the king. But in that helping blonde job, our boy ends up falling in a pit to death, but survives and finds ChatGPT-10 lying dormant there, a sapient being of an older civilization from a time when people used to watch manhwa recaps on Mamoru's channel and thought that AI wouldn't take over. And then bro starts prompt maxing his way from sidekick of the sidekick to the #1 genius of the academy and continent. Now what matters? Bros is also the lover of this thick yandere named Rebecca. She's more than ready for a four walls violent battle. But the price is that when she awakens her powers, you are going to die. Would you run or would you die fighting my soldier? Rest in peace since I know you. Let's get it. This is one of those basic isekai stories called World of the Seven Colors, where a high school kid named Lee Guan gets reincarnated to save the world from destruction. It's one of those plots where the kind of power the characters have is ridiculously over the top, and every single time he only makes it out alive by the skin of his teeth. On top of that, there are some totally crazy waifus who are always trying to kill the poor guy. There's a secret organization, he gets betrayed by his friends. Basically, everything bad that could happen to him does. And of course, when a story is trash like this, a lot of people end up liking it, right? Our protagonist was no different. He laughed at everything the guy went through. But would he still be laughing if he were the one in that world? The scene cuts to the kid running, carrying some swords, and someone calls him Ludian, seeing the massive stone beast coming in for a punch. He knows that if it lands, he'll be nothing but pulp. The creature smashes down behind him as he runs, and he quickly hands the sword over to Sir Eidos, gives the shield to Sir Colin, and bolts immediately. But of course, he's not treated well. These people are all ungrateful bastards, and now the monster is about to crush him for real, but Eidos steps in front and saves the boy. Standing there, he says with emotion that he's always grateful for the hard work of these folks. Then the man charges forward, slices the golem clean in half, and it crashes to the ground while our boy gets thrown back, ending up covered in blood. It's been 3 years since he reincarnated into the body of a 14-year-old boy in this world. On the bright side, he got all the memories. On the downside, he found out the boy's life was a complete mess. Reality hit hard, he had no talent whatsoever, and his life here was basically a waste. Suddenly, a blonde kid in the background calls out to everyone, saying the holy sword and the treasures are waiting for them. He's confident no wonder will be stopped by such weak monsters. That's the heir of the Iska region known as Kalain Von. He's your typical spoiled rich kid, flaunting all of his gear just because he's in hair, but in reality, all he does is try to hype up the group. Well, hype them up in a way, since everyone actually gets annoyed with him. He's like that extra character who's useless, yet somehow he's our protagonist's boss. Which means our boy isn't even the sidekick of the main guy, he's the sidekick of the sidekick. He's not just at rock bottom. Dig past the bottom of the pit, and that's where you'll find him crying. And to make it worse, this kid doesn't even have a promising future, meaning he's the sidekick of a guy destined to fail. The story of this world is also pretty terrifying. The creatures that appear are insanely destructive. Enemies in this place pop up out of nowhere and destroy entire cities or even nations. But before there's much time to think, they're already heading into another fight with the hellish minotaurs. Ludian knows there's no way he can survive in a world like this. But first, let's go back and see how he ended up in these dungeons. He takes a slap to the face and someone asks him what he did. That's Countess Louisa, the mother of Kalain, the blonde show-off, telling him she hired trash like him to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen. Apparently, all our boy can do is mutter a sad apology. He throws a look at Kalain, who just turns away like he doesn't want to make eye contact. Ludian is thinking about getting rid of that smug blonde brat. The guy has loads of money and struts around the city doing whatever he pleases. Back in his room, Ludian's exhausted. Most of the problems in his life are because of Kalain. And it's not even that Kalain directly messes with him, he causes trouble in the city for other people, and Ludian ends up taking the blame. He tells Kalain that Sir Volton is angry because he laid hands on his little sister. "Oh, Kalain, you just pulled the waifu into this boy's life." And then he warns him that the Count is furious because he's been making deals with the black market. That one makes Kalain jump, pacing back and forth, muttering that he's screwed. He asks if he's in trouble, and Ludian tells him it's obvious. This is the 15th mess he's caused this month. The problem is, it always falls on him. He can't understand why Kalain keeps acting like this. He's basically walking around with the Empire's biggest headache. And that's not even the worst of it. He's Kalain Iskar, and they're in the Iskar region. He owns everything here. The issue is, he only causes trouble in front of the nobles, then goes out partying with his friends. The bastard knows how to enjoy life. Lucky for him, miserable for everyone else. Kalain says he was just enjoying himself, but Ludian asks why it's that every single time he has to be seen doing something. Kalain replies that he was trying, to gather information on some secret operations, and judging by the look Ludian gives him, he's about ready to wring his neck. You can tell Kalain isn't a bad person in the sense of being evil. He's just bad in the sense that he was born with a 16 IQ. The worst part is that recently, the head of the household, Kalain's father, has been trying to improve the city's and the family's reputation, yet the kid keeps causing trouble over and over again. The problem for Ludian is that he's the one who has to fix all of it, and at this rate, it's just not working anymore. Already pulling his hair out, he tells Kalain to get ready, because soon he's going to lose his title as Hair, and then they're both screwed. Side by side, they'll be sent to the guillotine, and that will finally end the shame his father feels for having a son like him. There was only one way out of this crisis. Kalain knocks on the door, and the two of them walk in, legs shaking like overcooked noodles. The Sabigododo asks if they've finally come to talk. Ludian's plan this time was to expose everything this delinquent brat Kalain has been doing. The father's name is Ricard, and the man with the scar on his face is Captain Derek, who seems to understand the suffering Ludian goes through, probably because he's in the same boat. He glances indirectly at Ludian while saying that this time's mistake was massive, and it's going to be hard to make it out alive. Ricard says, "I've heard this incident was huge. Do you have any idea who these people are that you messed with? Honestly, don't these guys look like Titans from Attack on Titan? Look at the size of those balloon heads." The father continues explaining that they're from one of the 5 largest knight organizations in the Imperial Empire, and now they're looking to eliminate Kalain. That's when it hits Ludian. The problem was much bigger than he thought. If it involved the Imperial Knights, they were done for. He tells Kalain to get ready to head to the monastery. The kid doesn't want to, but his father says he has no choice. He only needs to stay there for about 5 years. Hearing that, Ludian knows that 5 years from now is exactly when the chaos in the Empire begins, and he'll die like a leaf blown away by the wind, without even the slightest chance to fight back. Kalain, trying to muster courage, slams his hand on the table and declares that he'll restore the family's honor. He says he'll make sure what he achieves will be enough to elevate their name. His father says it doesn't matter, even if he achieves great merit, it won't be enough to stop Imperial intervention. That's when Kalain says he's after the Holy Sword of Daylight. Ludian freezes, he knows exactly which dungeon that is, and he's sure it's impossible for someone at Kalain's level. The boy's lost his mind, he's basically asking to die. Kalain keeps talking, claiming that the Imperial forces showed up because they heard about this dungeon too. But if they can get there first, their family would surely gain status and the support of everyone. Ludian is impressed. Kalain really has a natural talent for saying anything to get himself out of trouble without having the slightest idea if it's even possible. This part of the story is known as the Belly of Apophis, where a group of strange cultists tries to bring about the resurrection of a demon lord. But to subdue this dungeon, 100,000 people once marched, and in the end, every single one of them ended up in Apophis' belly. In fact, Ludian thinks this might have been what happened when dungeons first started appearing. Ever since then, people always send a reconnaissance team first. That's why Ludian is certain the leader will definitely wait for the dungeon to be explored before sending his son. Ricard then says the dungeon is extremely difficult. We still don't know what's inside, but Kalain takes his father's hands and tells him to trust him. He squeals he'll conquer it, and all he asks is that his father believe in him just once. Ludian thinks Kalain is so naive. He honestly believes his father wouldn't hesitate to send his son to his death. But of course his father accepts, saying he'll trust him this time. The Titan with the scarred eye looks uneasy, probably because it seems like he's going to get dragged into this mess too. Ludian wants to say something, but the father just tells him to take care of his son, and the two of them are practically glowing in a way he can't interrupt. The bond between father and son in that moment is just too strong. The father shouts, "That's my boy," and the son answers, "I'll bring back the sword." Poor Ludian. He knew there was no way he'd be able to escape this one. And here we are now, with Derek saying the monsters are coming and ordering everyone to get ready for battle. The problem is, Ludian has already seen what's ahead, a minotaur right at the dungeon entrance, which makes it clear this won't be easy. Still, he's feeling a bit excited. The minotaur is actually a good sign. Maybe Kalain's entrance will be different from the protagonist's, right? It was supposed to have much more overpowered stuff, like demons wielding ancient weapons. Now he's eager for them to move forward. With his crooked fingers, he starts thinking, 10 years after the war begins, the whole world will already be devastated. But before that happens, there's still some time. Time for him to save money, live in the mountains, and isolate himself from everyone. He's going to write his own happy ending peacefully. Meanwhile, Kalain is all excited, saying everything's going perfectly. Soon they recover the light of dawn and all the riches hidden in this dungeon. Derek tells him to shut up. Not everyone knows about this, and they're going to end up getting into serious trouble. But the blonde kid tells him not to worry, acting like there's nothing to be afraid of. And then, of course, he freezes. A rock falls right onto Ludian's head, and the whole place starts collapsing. Derek immediately says they're screwed. They've walked right into a trap and are surrounded on all sides. He charges forward, saying they'll have to break through the formation with sheer force, and orders them to open a path. But something else is happening farther back. Ludian grabs Kalain and tells him to run, wondering why it feels like the two of them are being hunted. Derek, on the other hand, keeps pushing forward, cutting through enemies and calls out for the young master, but he's stuck on a golem that's completely ignoring him and heading straight for the two of them. Ludian shoves Kalain aside, and it seems like he narrowly avoids being crushed. The boy falls to the ground in tears, while Ludian thinks this is a nightmare. If the blonde brat dies, he'll be executed, so he can't let anything happen to him. But before he can finish the thought, he takes a direct hit to the stomach from a massive paw. The kid gets sent flying, literally launched. Kaline and Derek are stunned as our boy crashes back down, suddenly calling for his status window out of nowhere. After flailing and yelling for it for a whole minute, he opens his eyes to find himself lying on a strange floor, confused. Could this be hell? He gets up, moves his arms, and realizes his body feels fine. He thanks the universe, saying his prayers must have reached some god somewhere. The strange part is he has no idea where this place is. He remembers a similar dungeon from the story, something like a place made of negative mana, or something along those lines. Then, out of nowhere, a voice says he's awakened. When he turns his head, there's a big floating eyeball of tentacles staring at him. He jumps in shock and apparently faints again. He demands to know what the hell this is and why it's so ugly. The creature completely ignores the insult and says it's been 1,000 years since it last saw a human. It thought only divine beings could appear here, so today is an amazing surprise. The thing starts stroking his face, leaving Ludian confused about what kind of creature this is. He asks where they are, and it says these are the ruins of an extinct civilization called Adora, something Ludian has never heard of before. Trying to gather more information, he asks if the creature is sealed here. The fluffy-looking monster says yes, it still can't leave because it hasn't received a master yet. It says it would be nice to have one. Ludian finds the whole situation suspicious and asks for the creature's identity. The creature says it's a 7th-generation artificial intelligence observer, something known as Arcadia. Looks like the people of Adora let their version of ChatGPT go completely off the rails. Huh? And what happened? Well, it wiped out the human race. And of course, it now wants Ludian to be its master. But Ludian's wary. He knows that something like this will definitely bring him endless trouble. Too late though, the thing's already made its move. In an instant, the status window pops up for him. Ludian, 17 years old, descendant of the Icegar family, and his stats are absolutely pathetic. As he's looking at the numbers in disbelief, it suddenly hits him. The status window he'd always wanted had finally appeared. Arcadia tells him not to get the wrong idea. He's not in some kind of game. Still, he'll be able to see his own stats and those of other people. There's a catch though. There's a penalty that prevents him from seeing details when the difference is too great, but being able to tell who he can and can't beat in a fight would drastically increase his odds of survival. Ludian wants to know the condition for accepting Arcadia. It turns out he has to be someone from the outside. He has no idea what that means. He'd always thought only gods could reach that level, but apparently he's exceeded expectations. He asks how Arcadia knew he was an outsider in the first place. Arcadia explains that his body naturally reacts to the presence of an outsider. On top of that, with a body like his, he'd be able to recover other terminals that its creator left scattered around. Prototypes known as El Dorado, items for exploration, healing, transportation, and combat. Basically, there are 6 accessories he can equip to grow stronger and gain more abilities. Once Ludian collects all of them, Arcadia's body will be fully activated. Ludian starts thinking that with opportunities like this, maybe he actually could create a happy ending for himself. If that's the case, he agrees to register as Arcadia's master. This world is going to plunge into chaos sooner or later anyway, so it's better to be prepared. The two seal it in a surprisingly cute way, linking pinkies. Nothing unusual, except judging by the pointed eyelashes, Ludian figures it must be female. Then again, do artificial intelligences even have a gender? Who knows, but apparently, this one does. Arcadia scratches its chin, well the spot where a chin should be, and explains that its current body isn't much use. They'll need to recover the Shambhala combat prototype. With that, it could go toe-to-toe even with a god. Ludian feels something's off. This little thing is way too eager for him to collect these items. But he doesn't have much choice, so he stands up, saying he needs to get back to his companions. Little by little, he'll figure out how to recover these terminals. Its nickname becomes Addy, and it knows every exit from this place. It even tells Ludian that he should have died when he hit the ground earlier, was the one who caught his limbs and kept him from exploding on impact. He wonders if that was just the author's trick or if he really was fated to die there. That's when he looks down and sees a completely dead adventurer. He wonders who this person even was. Not only had he gotten past the dungeon's core, but he made it this far inside. Addy explains that he was an adventurer who invaded this place 10 years ago. He managed to reach that point by avoiding every monster, but he didn't have the qualifications to enter the room, so he died waiting. Ludian just thinks it's a miserable way to go, standing in front of a door that would never open for him. And so he starts collecting everything he can while Addy comments that it's a little, well, cruel. Ludian says his own life is cruel enough to justify stealing from the dead. The creature wonders if that isn't a bit too low, but Ludian just pulls an item from his pocket and says it should be worth about 10 gold. Then he notices the name of the person, Abel Retstain. He stops for a moment thinking and suddenly remembers exactly who Abel Retstain is. Instantly, he falls backward in shock, saying this is the worst possible name to find. That's because it's the name of the true protagonist of this world. But it doesn't make any sense. Abel was the kid who spread his arms for Truckcun and got sent to this place. He was reincarnated into the family of a baron, had legendary artifacts, and wielded an absurdly powerful sword. It should have been impossible for him to die at this point in the story, So why is there nothing here but his bones? And on top of that, the skeleton looked like it belonged to an older man, not a teenager. 80 asks what's wrong, but Ludian just says it's nothing. He knows that at this point in the timeline, Abel isn't far from this region and is living as a child in a certain household. For now, he decides to stay calm and think it's probably just a coincidence, most likely not the same person. They keep moving deeper into the cave, and what do you know? There's even a perfect little minimap. Ludian thinks the tentacled thing is actually pretty useful. Eventually, they spot a group ahead. It's the same people from before, and he happily calls out to the young master. But strangely, Derek and the others all turn toward him, saying that if he takes one more step, they'll cut him down. 80 is already waving a little white flag, asking what's going on because Ludian himself is confused. What happened while he was gone? Derek says that Ludian fell from such a height it would have been impossible to survive, so he must be some kind of monster or a copy. Ludian realizes what he's saying makes perfect sense from their perspective, but he still comes up with a clumsy excuse, claiming that when he started falling, he grabbed onto a branch, slammed into the side, dropped all the way down, and somehow survived. Derek, however, already has his sword at Ludian's neck and tells him to stay quiet. Unfortunately, he looks just about ready to end him. The blade is already in motion when suddenly, Ludian shouts the name Cynthia and starts telling a story about how Derek once tried to hit on this Cynthia, only for her to find out and how he ended up clinging to her waist, crying and begging her to come back. Derek tells him to please stop while also ordering the soldiers not to look over. Ludian knows he might still get killed later, but for now he's confirmed they recognize him. Kalyan, glowing with his usual energy, comes over asking why he took so long. Ludian just says he fell a long way down. At least Kalyan could easily tell it was really him, which put Ludian at ease. He tells Derek not to worry too much. If something happens, he can just kill the boy. Ludian sighs, at least relieved that he made it out of this alive. But as they walk through the dungeon, 80 says the hostility of this place hasn't faded yet. There's still something useful hidden here. Ludian finds it strange that nobody else notices 80, but the creature explains that only Ludian can see him, no other being in this world can. Now it makes sense why he needed to be an outsider. The problem is, this thing has been waiting for someone to arrive. Doesn't that mean there could be other people from another world? At that moment, a portal opens and a creature is sitting on a throne. A sword of dawnlight is there, only it's in the hands of a demon known as the Death Knight. Kalyan, of course, gets excited at the sight, saying they found the sword. The Deuce information was correct. If that's true, then the demon on the throne must be the former Lord Simmer. The monster stands and says he's disappointed. He thought it would be the Knights of Delphian who'd arrive. Derek immediately points his sword and tells everyone to attack. As he charges his aura, he asks why Lord Simmer betrayed his family and abandoned his chivalry like this. The monster simply replies that no one has noticed that the ground they're standing on is already rotting. On top of that, Simmer says they don't even deserve an answer, and stretches out his hands and summons a swarm of skeletons all around them. Derek keeps his cool and orders squads 2 and 3 to deal with the smaller creatures, while squad 1 focuses on the boss. Orders given, everyone rushes into battle. The fight breaks out on all sides while Addy and Ludian hang back, analyzing the situation. Derek seems fired up, but the problem is that any cut they land on the demon doesn't seem to do anything. It just regenerates instantly. Derek starts wondering if the creature's life force might be infinite. Meanwhile, Kalyan keeps telling the soldiers to push forward, insisting they'll win if they keep going. Ludian asks what's going on, and Addy explains there's some external force influencing everything here. Then Addy, sounding unusually girlish now, hair and all, tells him to use that amazing eye he received. He activates it, and the status window for Lord Simmer pops up. Strength minus 127. Combat power over 8,000. On top of that, he's linked to the dungeon's energy core, giving him immortality and infinite mana. Ludian is still wondering what the hell is going on when he spots a strange red crystal on Simmer's back. 80 explains that it's a bloodstone which can act as either a dungeon core or a mana reservoir. This place was created by mages 500 years ago, and unless Derek does something insane, there's no way they're taking this guy down. Ludian starts wondering if the best move would be to destroy it. Addy says it would be easy, except of course the demon isn't going to just let that happen. Simmer keeps summoning more and more skeletons. Addy, practically handing him an atomic bomb, says he should throw himself at it, even though the chance of dying is insanely high. Ludian glances around and sees everyone hesitating. If he doesn't act, they're all going to die here. One of the knights tells Derek they need to retreat. At this rate, no one will survive. The problem is, Kalyan isn't the type to back down, even though they've already tried pulling him out. Derek is wondering how he's going to get them out of this mess when Ludian tells him to look at the gem behind the throne. It seems way too suspicious. Derek takes a look, recognizes that strange object, and immediately calls for Arnold and Chris to push toward it. The problem is, the two are stuck fighting off a horde of skeletons. The captain knows they need a solution. The exit is blocked, and the enemy numbers keep growing. 80 asks if telling everyone about the crystal was really a good idea, since now the monster knows too. Ludian says that's perfect. Now that the demon knows, he can take a certain risk. He doesn't have any mana, but he does have this little trick up his sleeve that might work. Hiding behind a pillar, he knows that if he's caught, it's over for him. Arnold keeps pushing forward while Derek struggles to hold Simmer back. Unfortunately, Simmer sends a slash tearing across the ground, ripping through the dungeon. A wave of aura like that could only come from a master swordsman. Colleen wants to run, but now the exit is completely sealed off. Derek orders everyone to take advantage of the moment. If the monster just used that power, he'll be low on energy. But then he realizes several soldiers are already dead. Gripping his sword tightly, he says that as a knight of the Lion Hearts, he can't die like this. Even if he falls here, he'll make sure the young lord escapes. That's when he notices Simmer turn his head to the side, looking distracted. And there's Ludian, slipping past like no one can even see him. Ludian whispers to Adi that the plan worked, and Adi replies that he's made it pretty far. Then Simmer calls him insolent and leaps in to smash his head in. But Derek steps in front, saying he's not going to let him kill the boy just like that. Derek tells Ludian that if he destroys the core, he'll forgive him for everything he revealed earlier. Our boy takes off running with a massive hammer in hand, leaping forward with the certainty that he has to finish it in a single strike. But suddenly, a voice asks who this insect is that dares to destroy the heart. The voice says that the one who tried to destroy Castle's heart will now pay with his life. The name Castle rings a bell for Ludian. She's a lich girl who could slay dragons with a single special word. She was considered a national threat, and now she's standing right here. She starts chanting a word, and Ludian knows that if she finishes, he's dead. She's casting the certain death spell, but strangely, nothing happens to him. Inside the crystal, she looks confused. He's standing right in front of her, and she's wondering why her absolute word didn't work. Ludian realizes he didn't manage to hit the core in time, but at the same time, he didn't die either. The creature begins casting multiple high-level spells. Muttering that something is wrong, he has divine class protection on him. Ludian asks if it was Adi, and Adi admits it with a thumbs up. No low-grade curse like that could touch him. Adi casually fixes its hair, saying that even though it's a bit limited right now, that kind of thing is basic. The protagonist is baffled. This was Ninth Circle magic, so why did the thing just call it basic? He already feels overshadowed. How strong is this little creature act like Castle's power is nothing special? Castle keeps firing off spells, trying to kill him while shouting at him to stay away. Ludian remembers that she said the crystal is her heart, and he wonders why he wouldn't destroy it. So he asks Adi if he can break it in one strike, and Adi says yes. The crystal's structure is extremely fragile. He raises the hammer, and Castle quickly offers to give him anything if he spares her life. He asks if she can give him her life, but she says obviously not, anything except that. Treasures, knowledge, everything she's acquired in her lifetime could be his. Ludian is gripping the hammer so tightly it's about to explode in his hands. Meanwhile, Castle tells him to hurry up and kill Derek instead. But Ludian says it's too late. She'll be shattered before that happens, and slams the hammer into the crystal, ending all her ambitions. Immediately, everyone in the dungeon relaxes as Simmer drops his sword, writhing in pain. He collapses in front of Derek, and Ludian notices a strange energy flowing toward him. The system announces that he has absorbed the energy from a high-grade blood demon stone. His physical ability has increased, and he's gained 20 mana. That's huge considering his strength stat was only 15. Now he has more mana than anything else. He's practically in tears, feeling that blue energy coursing through his body. All the abuse he endured in that household finally paid off. Still, he thinks 20 is pretty low for a 500-year-old stone. Adi analyzes it and says, as expected, Ludian's absorption rate is extremely low. It's because Adi applied a filter so he could absorb it safely. He only received about 8% of the original amount. And strangely enough, Adi is siphoning off the rest for itself. Adi explains that the reason is because that mana is actually a form of demonic energy. Ludian could have absorbed it all and had over 1,000 mana, but in doing so, he would have become a demon, and that would have been useless to him. Ludian realizes Adi just saved him. If he had absorbed all of it, Derek would have killed him on the spot. And speaking of Derek, he's now calling out to him from behind. Ludian knows everyone saw him absorb that demonic energy, so this could be bad. But then Derek places a hand on his shoulder, and everyone starts thanking him, saying they won thanks to him. They have no idea how Ludian pulled it off, since Adi is there saying it's a secret. Back at the castle, someone is celebrating. Of course, it's the father, saying Colleen really managed to win. Not a single vassal in the entire empire will have the courage to doubt his abilities again. The future of the house looks bright. Colleen is there boasting that results like this are only natural for someone with his talent. His father says that the moment Colleen inherits the house, the family will have a glory it has never seen before. Meanwhile, Ludian is in the background, realizing he's been completely left out of all of this. And to make it worse, the loot haul was massive. Carriage after carriage of items from the dungeon just keeps arriving. The father says that in 1 week, the Duke will send someone to examine the sword, and without a doubt, it'll be someone impossible to ignore. He tells his son to make sure to leave an excellent impression on these Imperial people. While the father keeps praising him, Colleen is practically drooling with joy. Ludian already knew there wouldn't be much praise left for him, and the real problem is that if Colleen becomes famous, his screw-ups will become national news, which will make Ludian's life even harder. Still, for now, he's fine staying by Kalane's side, since it's been worth it so far. The father then says that now he can finally send his son out into society and turns to Ludian. He says that all the knights, including Derek, have spoken very highly of him. Ludian doesn't care much for compliments, but the father doesn't stop. He says he's heard that Ludian snuck in, took down the monster, and that he's incredible. He's counting on Ludian to always be by Kalane's side. Of course, that's the last thing Ludian wants, at least until a pile of money is shoved into his hands and he says, "Long live Kalane." He's given a year's worth of salary plus a bonus of 10 gold coins, which is a lot and even gets vacation time. 80 is there too, wearing a tiny crown saying that money is happiness. And honestly, Ludian's no fool. The most important item, this book surrounded by human guards, he kept for himself. It's a research grimoire containing the lifetime knowledge of a mage. Something like this could buy an entire castle. They definitely won't be needing money for a while. The question that still bothers him, though, is why the knight who stole the holy sword ended up becoming Castley's vassal. In the story, that sword first appears in the hands of someone known as Saint Croix, but no one knows how he got it. Maybe because at that point in the story, much bigger events were happening. Ludian has no idea. The guy wasn't the protagonist or anything, but it's still puzzling. Eddie tells him to focus. Their first enemies will be the demon race, and they need to recover the terminals, especially now that Castley is dead and the demons have no choice but to start marching. For Ludian, the best move would be to get the demon sword first. Eddie finds that strange, saying the holy sword is far better for fighting demons. But Ludian explains that holy swords are extremely hard to obtain, not to mention their demon magnets. Plus, he knows of a demon sword right there in the Escar region. If they could get the Diablo sword, everything else would be easier. The next chapter begins in the village of Uberan, a small and abandoned place with only about 500 people. In the home of a man named Marco, the village chief, he's begging Ludian for help. Ludian had wanted to spend some time in his hometown before going after Diablo. But when this dwarf came to talk to him, he figured something was going on in the village. And now that he's here, he finds out Marco is in tears because a flood of letters demanding tax collection has arrived. Apparently, the problem is that these people literally can't read. Marco is asking Ludian to look through the letters and see what they say. Ludian tells him to hire someone who can read, but Marco says that's far too expensive. So he agrees, feeling confident he can sort this out quickly, all while noticing that lately his body feels full of energy and his mind is sharper, probably thanks to that mana. Not long after, he's handing everything back with Marco on his knees thanking him. Ludian is feeling pretty proud of himself. After all, working in Kalane's household made things like this feel easy. Marco then tells him to visit Rebecca's house tomorrow after sunrise. Ludian asks why, and Marco explains it's because she's been taking care of his house the entire time he's been gone, so of course he should go thank her. Ludian, trembling, says he never asked her to do that, but Marco insists she goes there every day and promised to keep it tidy until he came back. The only problem is her presence has already left 3 guys in the village lovesick. This girl must be dangerous because Ludian is on the floor groaning. And right then, the door opens and in she walks. Honestly, she looks too soft and puffy-cheeked to be that dangerous. Something's not adding up. Best to tread carefully so you don't fall into a trap. Marco tells Rebecca to head out, saying Lord Ludian is very tired. But she steps inside, gives a little playful lick to her lips, and apologizes. Ludian glares at her, and she comes in with a slight pout, accusing him of being mean. Why would he look at her like that after being away for so long? Here's her backstory. She takes his hand, runs it across her face, and says he's finally back so they can have some fun again. Ludian thinks she's way too charming for a rural town like this. Naturally, the poor guys here are all just longing from a distance. Something suspicious, because the moment she approached Ludian, Marco slipped out the door. Ludian knows that any man who rejected a beauty like this would be called a eunuch, or worse. But the truth is, he wants nothing to do with her because she's nothing but a death sentence. One of the main reasons he prefers being Kalane's squire is this girl. She eventually becomes a blood witch who drains energy, one of the heroines of the main game, and one of the ones who betrays poor Abel, stabbing him in the back while saying she loves him to death. She's the dangerously unhinged Yandere type. One day she's in love with you, the next she's trying to kill you. She's also from the Bloodrain family. Just the aura of these people is enough to make anyone think twice about crossing them. Her bloodline is so rare that not long ago there was even an attempt to kidnap her, something Ludian himself stopped. Ever since then, she's shown an interest in him and eventually revealed her true surname, Bloodrain. Up until then, he had no idea. When he found out, he bolted. He never imagined she was that Bloodrain. Still, judging by her eye and hair color, she hasn't fully awakened yet, which means it's still safe. And she knows how to play the game, standing there all glowing and blushing, asking if he's tired and wants some help. Ludian says no, all while looking for a way to get out of there. Unfortunately, the more distance he tries to put between them, the more persistent she gets. It's a classic story. She even leaves saying she's going to make him a delicious meal and will be waiting for him. That relaxes him a little, and he thinks that at least she hasn't shown any signs of insanity yet. Of course, she's still a ticking time bomb, so he has to be careful. For the poor Ludian, the one who used to live in this body, turning down affection was nearly impossible when he was an orphan. The only people he knew in this town were Marco and his dear friend Rebecca. If it weren't for the fact that she'd one day stab you in the back, kill you, and drink all your blood, he might have enjoyed it. The scene then shifts to a camp where a soldier calls for the captain, warning that they're too far into enemy territory. The captain says they're only following orders, but a stocky soldier argues the orders have gone too far. Sneaking this deep past the border is madness. He doesn't really buy this talk about some hidden master living in the area. The captain looks thoughtful. He knows the order is absurd, but it came directly from the army's commander, so all he can do is follow it. In theory, a great master, a ninth circle mage, is supposed to appear here. On top of that, they've received information that the young lord of the Icegar family has obtained the holy sword. Maybe all of this is connected. 3 days later, there's Rebecca as usual, bringing food to Ludian, but he notices the village seems uneasy and asks what's going on. She explains that it looks like some bandits from the southern region have been showing up nearby. Ludian knows the southern region is just around the corner, so it's normal for people from there to cross into Iskar territory to steal. Still, the guards usually deal with them quickly, so why haven't they been taken down by the patrol yet? Rebecca says that since yesterday, every adventurer passing through the wall has been warning the villagers. He asks if the chief has said anything, and she tells him he apparently went to investigate. Ludian finds the whole thing suspicious. He's been in his body for 3 years now and has never once seen bandits in this region. Just as he suspected, something might be starting to move. 2 days later, near Iskar territory, Ludian arrives in front of a dungeon. In the original story, this place was known as one of the easier ones to find. You don't need a key or anything. Just wait for a certain solar or lunar eclipse. Eddie comments that it's well hidden, but someone must have discovered it before. So why does Ludian think no one has taken what's inside? He smiles at the sight of the sword and says it's because everyone who found it died. This is a weapon from an ancient war so old there aren't even any records of it in history. It's where the demon Diablo is sealed. In theory, it rivals the Grandia sword, an object of divine power. Normally, to get an item like this, you'd have to overcome countless trials. But this one, it's just sitting there in the middle of an empty cavern. No guardian, no monsters, nothing. That's because the moment you touch it, a curse activates and you're basically turned into a corpse before you can even pull your hand away. Ludian knows this is an incredibly powerful item, and with it, he might even be able to rewrite part of this world's history. His question now is, how strong is Eddie's protection? Could she keep him safe from the sword's curse? Eddie examines it and says she's not too worried. From what she can tell, this sword belonged to the Celestial War. Even though she wasn't part of that war herself, she's familiar with the power of generals on that level. Still, to be sure, they'd have to see the sword up close. Ludian's a bit confused, since when has Eddie been around? The Celestial War happened 10,000 years ago, but she said the place she was sealed in is only 3,000 years old. Maybe she comes from a time far older than the place of her sealing. Finally, they arrive at the spot where the sword is embedded. Ludian stands right in front of it ready. Despite being an insane weapon, it has a simple appearance, which is exactly why he wants it. Without a second of hesitation, he grabs the hilt, saying, "Here we go." In an instant, he finds himself without clothes in an empty black and white field. Suddenly, black liquid starts spreading on the ground. He wonders where his clothes went and why he can't move. His mind is a mess, strange black ink raining down from every direction. Eddie, looking slightly flushed, comments that his average size isn't that bad. He snaps at her to stop staring and demands to know where he is. She explains that she's already removed the mental corruption that was affecting his brain. He had been standing there for 5 minutes now. This curse is the reason why anyone who isn't killed outright by the sword instantly becomes the reincarnation of the demon king Diablo. The problem is, as that demonic power grows, it consumes the host's body. At least thanks to Eddie, he avoided being completely destroyed. But then, oh boy, he's rubbing the demon's sword across his face. What is he even doing? After that bizarre moment, he looks around and realizes he's still trapped in this place. The sword speaks, saying that the first person it's seen in 1,000 years. Will you be able to survive the curse? At this rate, Ludian's going to end up with every item he owns talking to him. The sword clenches its fists, declaring it won't let go. It's tired of being stuck here. It says it always tries to offer as much support as it can to anyone who arrives, but no one survives. It even droops a little, complaining about how bored it is, how it can't stand being here any longer. Then it flexes a double biceps pose, telling him to hold on and not give in to the curse. Ludian cuts it off, telling it to shut up, talks too much. The sword seems surprised that he looks completely fine, his body intact. That's odd. No one it's ever met has lasted more than 30 seconds holding it. She asks if he's okay, and he says yes. The sword scratches itself in confusion. This doesn't make sense. This curse was created by the archangels themselves. Not even gods would come out of it unharmed. Ludian also finds it odd. A demonic sword curse sounds more like something a demon would do. The sword starts to suspect maybe he's actually survived the curse, but that's not the case since he hasn't gained any boost in power. She decides it's fine though. The boy is worthy of her. Since he's resisted the curse, they should form a true blood contract, one that would let him wield her power without paying any price. An offer like that hasn't been made in over 10,000 years since the dawn of everything. Ludian repeats back what she said, no price to pay, and points out that he knows the moment she gathers enough power, she'll be able to leave the sword. Confused, she asks how he knows that. He tells her he's certain the one offering this contract is actually the demon king Diablo. In the main story, when the protagonist uses this sword for a while, the curse eventually starts affecting him. The demon breaks free, though the protagonist survives and kills him. The sword asks who Ludian really is, and he says it doesn't matter. All they're going to do is make a bet. He tells the sword to use all its power to try to take over his body. If he can resist for the next 100 years, she will have to hand over all her strength and knowledge. Diablo laughs, saying the boy doesn't know his place. Mana begins to spread, and he says the boy's arrogance is amusing, but now he'll learn the pride of a demon king. And besides, he's been waiting for 10,000 years, so what's another 100 if he loses? This was exactly the kind of blood pact Ludian wanted. In 10 years, the demons will start growing incredibly strong. Diablo will be bound by contract and won't be able to do anything. The sword's aura starts surging faster and faster, declaring that he won't escape her domination. The place begins to darken, and suddenly Ludian wakes up on the ground, wondering where he is. Once again, he's completely naked in a white field that looks like some sort of beach. He's sure his mind hasn't been taken over. If it had, he wouldn't even be able to think clearly. But at the same time, he senses something strange and looks behind him. A strange black creature takes form. He knows immediately this is Diablo's true body, at least smaller than he expected. The demon approaches, saying that Ludian is impressive. To think that a human blessed by the gods actually existed. Ludian is confused. Was the demon talking about Addie? But in theory, she's an artificial intelligence, not a god. The demon spreads his arms and says, unfortunately, boy, even with a god's blessing, you're not completely protected. Now that you've fallen into this unstable place, there's no way you're leaving alive. Ludian doesn't know whether he's lost or won. The demon explains that Ludian managed to seal his authority, but at the same time, he's temporarily lost the divine protection he had. Ludian drops into a stance, telling him to come at him. Since he can't predict what will happen here, he might as well throw hands with the demon. The demon chuckles, saying that he's certainly brave, but that's not why he's here. He sits down, saying he likes the boy's pride, arrogance enough to think about trading blows with a demon king. He also senses a strange fate in Ludian's life. He doesn't know why, but he's sure the boy's path will entertain him. That's why he's willing to cooperate with him. Besides, fighting now wouldn't be worth it. Not when you'd have to deal with that massive eye hanging above them. For a moment, Ludian wonders if that's Diablo's power, until Addie apologizes, saying Diablo's strength caught her off guard for a second, causing a delay. Suddenly, he's back in reality, sword in hand, as it declares that it will now be under his care for the next 100 years. Ludian's still not entirely sure how it all happened, but he knows he's now in a better position to prepare for the calamities ahead. Sometime later, he's training with the sword while Rebecca stands nearby, blushing hard. She's looking dangerously yander right now. She even gets a nosebleed. She asks why he's training so much and sweating like that, and he tells her it's because he's regained his hope. Now that he has both Addie and Diablo on his side, he doesn't have to keep living as the NPC of an NPC. This world is going to face alien invasions, demon attacks, and wars, so he can't just sit around hoping things work out. He has to get stronger. Maybe he should even go back to training to become a proper knight. After all, having 20 mana isn't a bad start. The problem is, suddenly awakening mana like this would look suspicious. Rebecca then asks if he has any plans for today, or if he'll be talking to the chief. While speaking, she runs her hand over his chest, saying, if you want, I've got something good for us to do. He tries to reply, but she doesn't even listen. He ends up grabbing her hand, telling her he needs to check on the bandits that have been spotted nearby. After all, they need to make sure nothing bad happens to the village. That's when Ludian wonders if this might be the event that triggers her awakening. She hasn't yet turned into a witch, but she's already tossing around 2 magic orbs like it's nothing. He's unnerved while she just smiles and asks if there's something on her face. All he can picture is her coming up behind him and stabbing him through the back. He says there's nothing wrong at all. The scene shifts to a forest at night with 2 people walking in the rain. Selma tells Lucilla to wait, but she replies that she's far too excited to see the holy sword after all this time. The man says they're not so weak that they'd risk themselves for a symbol like that, but she answers that she's simply curious. The light of day may not be a holy sword granted by the gods, but it's still a divine relic of the Empire. The man shrugs and says whatever. If it was really that valuable, they would have sent another team. But Luciella says his presence is enough, and that the Iskar family will be pleased. He tells her to cut it with a sweet talk, that it's exactly because of her chatter that he's stuck on this cursed trip in the first place. On the carriage, the name Mark Iskar is written. What's going on? Ludian doesn't understand. Does that mean he's part of the Iskar family too? The town bell starts ringing and Marco is ordering everyone to get organized, telling them to sharpen their swords and talk to Ludian if they have any questions. But instead, everyone shoots Ludian nasty looks, saying they're not interested in taking advice from an orphan. Just because he became a servant for a big house doesn't mean he's anything special. Addie asks if he's okay with that unprovoked insult, and he says he's fine. That kind of thing doesn't bother him. She comments that judging by his expression, it clearly does. Diablo, hanging at his waist, says it's pathetic to hire someone who puts up with that kind of humiliation. With just a little demonic energy, he could tear all of them apart. Ludian tells him to shut it, and the sword apologizes. That's when Mark shows up, saying the person he was waiting for has arrived. It's the information broker he asked to meet. Inside the cabin, the broker reports that Mount Constant has been attacked. That was an important military base. Whoever's attacking isn't just some small-time bandits from the Empire. He suspects they might be soldiers from another empire, maybe the Kingdom of Rohans, disguising themselves as bandits. 3 other regions had already suffered similar fates. Ludian realizes the real problem isn't bandits. If it were just cavalry, it could be handled. The true danger is if there are demons mixed in among these people. That would make the fight much harder than he'd like. 80 warns that someone's approaching. Ludian gets up, saying there's no choice. As he heads out, he tells Diablo to give him some support. Diablo says fine, he's eager to see what the people of this era are capable of. Ludian runs with the sword in hand, knowing that even with demonic power, his body is still far too weak to withstand much. The worst part is if he uses demonic power and turns into a demon, he'll be hunted. That's when someone calls his name. It's Rebecca. He tells her to get inside. She's soaked. She seems anxious, maybe sensing instinctively that a crisis is coming. He decides to play it cool, puts a hand on her shoulder and says, "Don't worry, just stay right here, and I'll handle it." At the town entrance, Megs arrive. Marco tells them to back off. This is the Iskar region's border. He already knows they're just southern bandits, so they better leave. The scared man says they're badly misinformed. Sure, their arrival might be obvious, but soon enough, everyone living here will pay. Ludian activates his eye and sees the man's name, Bernard Calcio. Power level, 1,280. Pathetic. He's clearly starving for real strength. There aren't many of them, so Ludian figures these are probably the ones raiding villages in the area. Marco orders everyone to fall back, but Ludian is right there at the front line standing his ground. The bandits are confused. Why is everyone else running? Bernard orders his men forward, heading straight for Marco. He swings his sword to take Marco's head, but Ludian steps in and blocks the strike. Bernard is surprised his attack was imbued with mana. Ludian forces him back, and Bernard admits the kid knows how to handle a sword. He also notes that Ludian's blade is fine craftsmanship and says he wants it for himself. Ludian bolts, this guy's a freak, worse than Rebecca. But Bernard calls out that he won't escape the cavalry until all the horses suddenly go down with arrows. That's when Bernard realizes these bastards had already set up an ambush and were hiding. Ludian taunts him to come closer if he's so eager to die. As Bernard advances, he notices the entire area has already been evacuated. He orders his troops to kill everyone in the region. Even though those guys had the numbers, there was no way they were winning. Then, out of nowhere, one of them falls into a pit, and right after that, a sword takes his head clean off. That's Ludian's doing. First kill on the board. Honestly, I thought he'd be the forgiving type. The villagers keep retreating while Marco gives orders, and the arrows are hitting hard. One soldier warns the captain that these people are far too well prepared. They should pull back and call for reinforcements. But the captain is too eager to die and orders everyone to keep advancing. Elsewhere in the village, Ludian hides with Marco. They gain a good advantage, but those attackers are still much stronger overall. Marco looks unsure, but Ludian tells him not to worry. He's not going to die. He's charging in because he's not the same person he used to be. Inside one of the houses, Rebecca is in distress. Poor thing, don't suffer like that, especially lying there in that position. She's writhing, saying she needs to help Ludian, when suddenly she finds herself surrounded by people holding candles in some kind of ritual. What's going on? She's sweating and trembling, muttering about helping Ludian while remembering him all bulked up. And Deben grabs her face, and that's when the Yander awakening begins. She says she wants to eat. Well, she already wanted that. Meanwhile, Ludian is still fighting, trying to hold his ground. He can't use too much of Diablo's power, or he'll turn into a demon himself. But if he holds back too much, the village will be destroyed. When one soldier rushes in just to get stabbed, Ludian can't help but notice. The guy didn't even know how to use his spear properly. Fool left it pointed downward. The rest of the mounted bandits warn each other to stay back because there's a trap between them. The villagers are celebrating. Everything they planned is working. Well, everything Ludian planned. Bernard starts to realize this place is a living hell. No matter where they go, there's something waiting for them. In the last village, it was easy. Kill the leader, lop off his head, and everyone else falls in line. But here, the damn leader is standing his ground, mocking them, calling their troops pathetic. Ludian is one of the few who knows Marco might look weak, but the guy was once a centurion in the army. He can handle himself. Ludian decides that if he kills Bernard, this will be over. Bernard is shocked. He can't underestimate the boy just because he's young. He's seen Ludian's skill with a mana blade. Bernard dismounts, saying he's realized the boy is the source of this village's courage. In honor of that, he'll share something. This location was meant to be where his unit completed its mission. But he's the commander, not the captain. Ludian instantly understands this isn't the only attack happening, which means even though they've set up all these defenses, other parts of the Empire are being wiped out. Reinforcements from Iskar are probably on their way. The question is, will they hold out if more enemy troops arrive? While he's deep in thought, Someone interrupts, asking Bernard what he's doing. Bernard turns with a smile, saying the captain has arrived. And wow, this guy's got arms bigger than his torso and legs like twigs. Clearly needs more squats. Ludian activates his eye and sees the name. Alex Ruma's 145 years old, never trained legs a day in his life. Combat power, 3,600. Obviously a servant of the demon clan. Even his horse looks like it's suffering under the weight of this guy. The good news for Ludian? He showed up without any companions. The bad news? His stats are way higher than Ludian's. The really scary part, he's just a mid-level demon, yet already as strong as Derek. Ludian's read about countless demons in the story, but seeing one up close is an entirely different thing. The Bernard guy was about to apologize, but the demon smacked him in the head so hard that, damn, it practically disintegrated him. Ludi immediately told the villagers to run because there was no way they could win here. Marco gave the order, but he was clearly worried that the kid wouldn't stand a chance either. His body wasn't built to withstand an attack from that monster. The bastard just stood there radiating aura, looking like Vi from League of Legends, and then asked why the kid was interfering with their plans. The contacts should have already arrived, or had they moved too quickly. Ludian had no idea what they were talking about, but the demon told him to stop pretending. He'd seen countless others, so of course he'd noticed. He ordered him to state his name and the demon he served. Ludian realized this guy thought he was part of the demon clan, probably because the Diablo's energy leaking from him was tricking the guy. Since the opportunity presented itself, he decided to use it to buy some time. Still, he was honest and said his name was Ludian. Probably should have lied and given a different one. The demon found it odd. No family name, not a noble. And who did he serve? Ludian remembered that demons often infiltrated noble families, since it was easier to exert influence that way. He also knew the names of certain beings, so he claimed to serve Lord Asmodeus. Alex then said he served the goddess of lust and indulgence, basically vice and debauchery. Him he wasn't so sure about, but there was definitely someone in the village who would fit that role perfectly. Diablo, however, scoffed, calling it ridiculous to regard Asmodeus, a goddess of such low standing, as anything impressive. The demon said appearance could also be considered a talent, and he understood why the goddess liked him. For such an ugly demon, he acknowledged that Ludian had inherited her blessing in the form of beauty. And oh boy, was that the goddess holding him like that, tongue out. Every single woman in this story was dangerous. Honestly, Ludian needed to get out of this world and leave the handling of these women to someone else. Ludian then told him he hadn't heard anything from her, but demons were invading his land. The monster said that was strange, the message should have arrived already. Ludian asked where it was sent, since it hadn't reached him. Alex replied that it could be a matter of timing, but it should have been delivered by Viscount Belstead. Our boy was crafty, managing to get the intel he wanted. He realized now that this guy was a complete nobody in the original story, so insignificant he'd forgotten he existed. Probably because of Castley's death, he'd gone mad, which explained why he'd sent someone with this much power to the village. The demon then asked what was with that killing intent he was giving off, and Ludian replied that it was normal when facing an enemy. Alex said fine, but did he really think he could win with that power? With that human body, he was inferior in every way. Ludian thought to himself that the guy was right. He really was an inferior knight, but that only applied when comparing pure skill. When he flared his aura, it startled Alex, but 80 warned he could only handle it for a minute before losing his mind. Ludian said he knew, but he was about to find out just how useful this power could be. He immediately charged forward with his sword enveloped in purple aura and landed a clean slash. Alex didn't even react. The problem was, while his blade was still embedded, the guy was winding up something like Vi's ultimate straight to his chest. But Ludian pulled his slick acrobatic move, dodged, and sliced the guy's arm clean off. Damn. The demon looked at his severed limb in confusion, wondering why it wasn't regenerating. Ludian told him it was because his soul had been cut along with it. That was the special power of Diablo's blade, the reason it was classified as a high-tier weapon. It was known as a godslayer because it could strike a person's very soul and even harm divine beings themselves. He tells Alex that he was planning to take the risk of fighting at close range, but luckily the idiot dropped his guard. The demon comes in to punch him, saying this won't end here. But strangely, the attack hits a dark barrier and nothing happens. The demon demands to know why his energy is being absorbed. This wasn't the kind of power the goddess of lust could have given to some kid. Of course, what's really happening is that Diablo is absorbing it, but he warns our boy that he won't be able to keep it up for long. The demon attacks again, saying he won't lose to a brat like this. But our boy just sidesteps, swings out another slash, follows with a flurry, the blade whipping like a whip, and drives the point straight into his stomach. Ludian thinks that the risk of becoming a demon is worth it, since it means he can also absorb these guys' energy. He swears that one day in this kingdom, he'll have severed the heads of every last one of those bastards. The monster screams that he's a traitor, but Ludian just replies that he's got it completely wrong and can go ahead and die, torn in half. Next chapter, he's standing there in full swagger, holding that big purple sword. Watching an entire person get sucked away really drives home that this is a true demonic blade. Diablo then asks why he was protecting that human earlier. Was she his property? The poor guy blushes, saying the demons are trying to kill Rebecca and take control of her. That's why he sent her far away. The sly sword says that to protect her from demons, he'll need to keep her nice and close. Not to mention, she seemed like the type of woman human men would like. Lubian just tells the sword to shut up and sheath itself, saying he knows very well how much the protagonist suffered. He doesn't want to go through that too. For him, the best option is for her to keep living a normal life and never suffer the fate of becoming a witch. As he turns away, 80 says someone's approaching. It doesn't seem like an enemy since it's a human, but it's an old man and a young girl. Ludian thinks the combination is odd and doesn't know what to do. He's out of energy, but avoiding them would be hard. Too late, they're already right in front of him. 80 had said they were normal people, but obviously not. From the extremely luxurious clothing, it's clear they're nobles. And if that's the case, they should have been far away from here by now. A gorgeous blue-haired girl arrives, giving him a little wave, but the moment she gets close, he catches the scent of blood and greets her back. The man then comments that he looks like a frightened little puppy, but not bad for a warrior. Ludian tries to analyze the man's power, but his block is far above his level. While Microshorts is stretching, a man asks if he was the one who killed all these enemies. Ludian says no, that many villagers helped. But the man isn't stupid. He says he can tell from the sword's trail that it was Ludian. The boy looks like a teenager, so to have that much skill, he must belong to a powerful family. Meanwhile, Lucilla is fixing her hair, saying that if her uncle is interested, then the boy must have something worth offering. Her uncle says, of course, after all, the boy has awakened mana at this age. Ludian finds it strange. How does this guy know he used mana? Now Blue Hair is even more impressed, thinking he must be a student at the Imperial Academy have such talent. But the man says that's impossible. If he were a student, he'd already know him. He orders Ludian to state his name, which he does. Then, when asked for his family name, Ludian admits he doesn't have one. Both of them are shocked. No family and not a knight. He awkwardly says he's the squire of Lord Kalain from the Esgar Empire. And suddenly, for no real reason, he puts on this speech, saying that this is his homeland and he came here to protect the people of this village that he loves so much. Now he's curious to know who these two are, since he's never seen people like them around here. The older guy introduces himself as Cadel von Delphion, and Microshort's girl as Lucilla von Delphion. Father and daughter, maybe. The name doesn't sound unfamiliar to Ludian. This guy seems to be the so-called Sword Saint. In the Morian Empire region, he was the only one who held that title. And apparently, he's the father of the guy who, in theory, will become the friend of the real protagonist of the story, which is not Ludian. That's the Holy Crocs guy who wields the Light of Day sword. And Lucilla, a dangerous knight who was also part of the protagonist's party and eventually became a commander in the anti-demon forces. In the future, Ludian knows she's going to be a threat, but right now she's still very young. Haha, scared of jail time, huh? Suddenly, Cadel gestures toward the sword and asks where Ludian learned to use it. The protagonist breaks his sweat for a second, but says he picked up the basics here and there, trained a bit with mercenaries in the region, and had a few sessions with knights. Cadel, being nosy, says it's strange for someone like him to hide their identity. Could he be some high-level mercenary in disguise? What did his trainer look like? Ludian's obviously not going to say that his trainer looks like a floating red blob. That's because that's exactly how he's been practicing, with 80 holding 5 or 6 swords while he trains against them. Then Lucilla steps in, telling her father to stop asking so many questions, because Ludian was starting to look uncomfortable. Ludian's a bit surprised. It's rare to see a noble apologize, especially when he's used to dealing with Kalain. She leaves with a bright smile, saying they'll help out the village and telling him to take care of himself. He gives her a shy thumbs up, thinking to himself that she really is a heroine. But not long after in the city, it seems like Derek will have to deal with those two, which probably means it'll fall on Ludian too. Since he's on break, he's not looking to get involved in anything complicated right now. They say goodbye to Ludian, telling him they'll see each other later. Back home, lying in bed, he wonders if Rebecca is okay. I'm wondering the same thing. Is he not going to check on that crazy girl? Oh, he didn't go because he didn't have the time. He was dragged to the city right after those two arrived. The upside for him is that he won't have to help clean up the village, which is also a mess. Still, he remembers that Lucilla had a strong scent of blood for someone her age. She probably killed a lot of people and monsters along the way. Then he sits up, remembering he needs to get the rest of 80, especially since he didn't even get to see Cadel's full power. Instead of living as a mercenary, it might be better to take the knight's path now and start building a solid reputation in this world. He glances out the window and sees there's a celebration going on. For now, the problems are solved, but it's a shame to think that in 5 years, no one will be living comfortably anymore. Suddenly, Eddie tells him he has visitors. And here comes Kalain with Derek, wanting to know why he didn't attend the banquet. He awkwardly says it's obvious. He doesn't have enough status to be in a place like that. Kalain plays the nice guy, saying that's not true. He's his squire and has the right to be there. Of course, Ludian doesn't want to go, but Kalain is pushing him. Then Derek comments that he's heard Ludian managed to do something amazing again. The protagonist is confused. News about him is spreading a bit faster than he'd like. It's probably because either Cadel or Lucilla told the Count. Ludian starts wondering why Derek is dragging this out until he reveals that it seems those two made an extra request. He asks him to guess, and the request is for Kalain to go to school for 7 days to receive training, meaning he's going to the Imperial Academy. Ludian thinks this is insane, that Colleen will ruin the family's reputation if he goes to a place like that. And then the obvious happens. To keep Colleen from causing too much trouble at the academy, Ludian will have to go with him. The next chapter starts with Cadel saying that this holy sword has a truly unique feeling to it. Everyone's watching, saying it's good to see him impressed. He comments on how strong Simire was and that he's impressed Derek managed to handle it. He truly lived up to his title as the Lion of the region. Cadel then says that now that it's confirmed they secured the sword, it's time to get down to business. He claims he has a simple, trivial request for the Count. But Lord Ricard is already trembling. He knows requests from people like this are never trivial. The man then says he's heard that among the squires there's a boy named Ludian, and he wants to take this squire with him. Ricard hesitates, wanting to know why he's so interested in this kid. The man says he'll reveal it. He's noticed the boy's talent. Apparently, Ludian seems like an ordinary person and hasn't even taken the knight's oath, but he wants to place him within the imperial family and turn him into a great soldier. Ricard is confused. Plenty of talented people can't get in there, so what exactly did Ludian do to catch this man's attention? With little choice, Ricard says his son Colleen will be very upset, but there's not much he can do. Then he notices the girl in the back smiling from ear to ear. That's when he seems to get an idea. He says that boy will support his son, who will become lord in the future. So he suggests that he can send Ludian to the academy to go with him, but once he graduates, Ludian will be free to choose which path to follow. Ketel agrees, saying leaving the choice for later doesn't sound so bad. That's when Ricard adds that this would be the perfect opportunity to send his own son along. Back to the present. That's how it all happened. Ludian is now going to become a transfer student to the academy alongside the young master. He thinks it doesn't sound so bad, but still, why did nobody bother to ask him about any of this? He's literally the most important person in this whole arrangement. A little later, Microshorts is waiting for him outside. Now it's clear why they said they'd see him later. They obviously already had everything planned. Cadel says he'll give him a week to get used to the idea, and then he's to come to the capital. The new troublemaker of the moment congratulates him on accepting the offer, like he really had a choice. At least he's glad to have a week to prepare and says he'll see them soon. Sometime later, at a tavern in the village of Baron, Mark is celebrating, saying he never imagined such a great knight would be born from this place. Ludian tells him not to exaggerate, he's only just starting his career, it's nothing special yet. But the guy insists it's practically guaranteed now, and what he really wants to know is which banner Ludian is going to serve under. Ludian ignores that completely and instead asks how Rebecca is doing. Mark explains that she's still bedridden, the last incident was severe. Ludian doesn't say much, but he goes to visit her. She's lying there red-faced as always, this girl never changes. It looks like she's grown a little and she says she's feeling better, but wants to know what this business about him going to the capital is. Does he really have to go? Ludian notices she's more direct than before. She says she thought him just working there and living a quiet life would be enough for them to be happy. Seems like she's already married him in her head and he didn't even know about it. Now he's feeling a bit shaken. Avoiding her because she's obsessive was just an excuse. He shouldn't be so timid in this moment of chaos. He should understand how much she means. But right now, he has other plans. He places his hand over hers. It's already trembling a little, and says he knows the villagers think he's already accomplished great things. But he doesn't believe that's true, and he's not even interested in that. What he really wants is something else entirely. He knows that if things keep going the way they are, this place will disappear before long. Rebecca, having lost her home, runs into Abel and sets off on an adventure. Even if he just stood still in theory, Abel would drive out the demons, but the people of that village would all disappear. Wait a second, wasn't Abel supposed to be dead? Shouldn't you confirm first if he's even alive? I'm a bit lost here. Still, he knows that this future is no good for either him or Rebecca. He says he knows it's going to be a difficult path, but it's one he has to take. I'm still not sure I'm following everything, but let's just roll with it. He also knows that Rebecca won't really grasp the weight of his words. And right then she asks, what if she awakens this blood, her eyes already starting to turn red along with her hair? Would she be able to help him somehow? At that moment, she says she already knows that in some way he was aware. Ludian finds this strange, because in the original story, she only learns about these talents after getting involved with the main protagonist. He answers that he had no idea, liar, and adds that this power would only make her unhappy. The problem with that energy is that it fundamentally absorbs demonic power, something that's fatal for humans, and the stronger it gets, the worse it is for her mind. Speaking calmly, he tells her he wants her to live happily here. He'd rather see her as energetic and cheerful. At the same time he's saying this, he's thinking it would be good if he replaced Abel, which I'm still not totally sure about. She says she'll stay and he thanks her, but she asks for a promise. When everything is over, he has to come back. He says fine, honestly just take her with you and it would all be fine, right? He's going to the academy anyway, so he could take her, but whatever. We already know the author's good at throwing in new trouble, so we'll see. Sometime later, while talking with Diablo, Ludian says it was that bastard's fault Rebecca ended up like this. He knows her demonic manifestation only happens when she comes into contact with demonic energy. It has to be from a high-level creature, and the only one in the region is obviously him. Diablo just replies that it's impressive how much Ludian really knows. It was worth following him. Ludian asks if he's admitting to it, and Diablo says no, he'd never do something like that. Besides, to awaken her power, he'd also take damage himself, and he wouldn't risk that. But in a way, it was indeed his power, though completely indirect. Ludian gets what he means. The power he absorbed into himself from the sword caused her awakening, meaning it was actually his fault and not the sword's. His contract with Diablo is basically making him walk around as a high-level demon. He tells the bastard to warn him about these things beforehand. For now, all you can hope is that nothing bad happens to her. How about watching over her? No. Well, 1 week later, they arrive at the capital. He's there in awe. The place is vast compared to the small village he came from. The name of this capital is Nevin, and judging by that pink-haired girl over there, we already know this is a place for the real big shots. For the first time, Ludian felt like he was in a fantasy world. Because killing a minotaur and turning into an angel didn't exactly feel like fantasy to him. Then Colleen poked his finger in his face and asked if he'd eaten something good or what. That was because he noticed everyone was paying attention to the boy, his father, and even Derek. And that blonde kid was jealous of our boy. Imagine if he met Rebecca. He'd go crazy. Colleen revealed that his father had forced him to go to whatever house Ludian went to, no matter which one it was, and he thought that was strange. That's when Ludian realized no one had told the blonde kid that he was in the capital because of him and not because of the talents he had. Then Colleen said he trusted their friendship and he was sure the boy wouldn't hide his secret from him. Right. Ludian said, never, while thinking to himself that this bastard was talking about friendship but was always messing with him. Colleen then said he'd see him at the academy. If anyone messed with him for being poor, for being just an ordinary person, he should just say something and he'd take care of it. And right away he went off to talk to the women in the city. As always, Ludian already knew this guy was going to cause trouble and maybe even get expelled. But since he was personally invited, that wasn't his problem anymore. In the main part of the state, at the Delphian household, look who's showing up, the Gangrene Gang. Someone at the gate asked why they brought that kid instead of the sacred sword he'd asked for. Keitel said it was a hobby of his to bring people over, but the guy was being harsh. Vincent, who was the brother and head of the Delphian house, said he didn't think the Iskar clan would actually manage something like this. Ludian knew this guy was one of the main figures of the Mauryan Empire. When Vincent grabbed the huge sword, he said the prophecy really was right. Naturally, Ludian immediately perked up at that and thought it was strange. Vincent then called out to him, saying it had been a while since he'd seen Keitel so interested in someone, so he wanted to have a little chat. But from the looks of it, this guy wasn't good news, because Ludian was already feeling nervous. At the round table, Vincent said the trip had been long, so he hoped they could rest. And Keitel agreed, saying that recovering a sacred sword obviously hadn't been easy. You guys just went there, grabbed it, and brought it back. Those bastards didn't do a thing. Ludian was just listening while Keitel said his brother must be upset about the price he had to pay to the Iskar, but he replied it was fine, it was worth it. Then Keitel said that was strange because when he brought Lucilla, the guy didn't care, so why now? Was he trying to figure out who Ludian was? I'm already worried. He didn't care about the fierce Lucilla. Although she's young, so better leave it at that. The guy probably doesn't want to end up in jail. He then called our boy over and said that from what he'd heard from the Iskar people, he was pretty talented. He had personally taken part in the raid, and our boy confirmed it. The man kept praising him, saying he'd heard he'd gone forward alone and destroyed the core. Our boy also said yes, while wondering how the hell this guy already knew everything that had happened. Vincent then changed his expression and said he wanted to know everything Simmer had said while consumed by the power of that sword, without leaving out a single detail. Keitel, confused, asked his brother why. Ludian thought to himself that he had nothing to hide, so he went ahead and told him the whole story. They started thinking about that thing Simmer had said, "You don't even realize the ground beneath your feet is rotting." Ludian added that something else that stood out was how the guy kept referring to some master and even apologized when he died. That caught Vincent's attention because the Sword of Daylight is also known as the Sword of Prophecy, and now he was sure a certain future was inevitable. Keitel told him to explain, but the fool said he was just joking. All right then. Ludian just stared, and nothing suspicious about this guy, right? Arriving at the Imperial Academy, a man said it was rare for someone to bring a student there like this. Plus, the last time he'd seen Keitel was at the prince's coronation. This was the master of the academy, Roses Bavelin. 30 years ago, this man had become a war hero who fought on the front lines against the barbarians. Even Ludian seemed to be admiring him. Apparently, the guy was the real deal. Then Keitel said this boy wasn't just talented, he was actually a genius. Roses seemed impressed, and Keitel finished by saying the kid was on Crook's level. The problem for our boy was that this Crook guy was the only person as strong as the protagonist. It was said that he could fight a god if he had a sword in his hand, and Ludian was sure the expectations for him had just gotten a bit higher than he wanted. Keitel said there was no need to even test him. In a few years, they'd know if this kid had the talent to become what he hoped for. The professor thanked him and said not to worry. He would train the boy like a northern barbarian. Wait, wasn't this the guy who killed the barbarians? Traitor? In the Imperial dormitory, Ludian was impressed. The boy got a VIP room all to himself, perfect for bringing the ladies over. Kato was leaving. Annoying guy never gives him a break, but still said he'd be spending 7 years there. Our boy asked why they were going so far for him. Considering Kato had basically bought him from the Eskar, he didn't have to go through all this trouble. Any place would have been fine for him. Kato said it was simply because he wanted to support a talent with a promising future. Even so, Lubian said this was already too much. Everything in this place was way too expensive for him. Then Kato turned around and said he'd made a bet with the Count. Would Ludian join the Lionhearts or the Knights of Glory when he graduated? Ludian didn't understand why, but Kato told him not to worry about it. Just focus on getting stronger. Our boy was standing there thinking he wouldn't choose either of those two anyway, because the academy was just one of the first steps. Finally, the guy left and gave him some peace. The sly guy smirked and said that of course he wasn't going to give up any of the benefits. Once he was alone, he called for Diablo and asked if he'd felt anything strange here in this territory. The sword said it was odd, but answered no, there was nothing different. Besides, he had to remember that most of his senses were sealed inside his sword, so it's not like he could really make much sense of things. Addie came over and asked if something was bothering him. He admitted that yes, in the original story, both Vincent and Kato are killed by demons. After that happens, the fierce Luciella takes control of this place. What he couldn't figure out was why. At the moment, everything seemed normal. He could guess how Kato died since the guy is constantly leaving the castle, but you and Vincent was strange. Considering he was a high-ranking noble, maybe he was in the crosshairs of other nobles. Something was going on, something he still hadn't figured out. Maybe it would be best to spy on the Duke's household. Next chapter, we're in the classroom to meet this fierce bunch. Eddie was excited, saying everyone was starting to notice the boy's value. Meanwhile, he was thinking that being a transfer student really draws attention. Diablo, on the other hand, said there were plenty of talented people there to feast on like a buffet to him. Ludian knew all this attention was because he had the backing of Kato and the Delphian family. While he was lost in thought, a man came up and asked to sit beside him. He said yes. But really, his name was Adele? A woman's name? Come on. The guy was already trying to start a conversation, saying it had been 10 years since a transfer student had arrived, so naturally he was standing out. Ludian gave an awkward smile, saying it was strange, but he wasn't anything special. Adele, however, disagreed. Transfer students were practically banned from the academy. Normally, it only happened if you were from an extremely powerful noble family or had connections to the imperial family. Since the famous crooks, no one had managed to do it again. And on top of that, Kaleem was also attracting attention. He knew both of them had recovered the sacred sword, which was incredible for their age. Lubian was thankful that Kaleem was in the same department, but in another class. At least he wouldn't have to deal with that kid. Then Adele said he'd come to talk to him because of a special request from the student council president. He mentioned Luciella's name and said that since he'd met Kato, he must know about her. Oh, so Luciella was the student council president? Now that's a commanding girl. Adele then revealed that he'd be serving as the boy's guide so he wouldn't get lost in his first days here. But since they were both from the cavalry department, it would be strange for them to just sit around talking. In other words, he meant sparring. Ludian, however, was already getting nervous. Would he be able to use demonic energy? We're now outside with Adi at his side. Let me introduce these two, though I think they'll disappear soon enough. On the left was Oliver, on the right was Claudia, and the one with the purple hair, who was probably going to be trouble, was Karen Letitia. Two Brazilian names in the same troublemaker. She said nice to meet you to him, adding that if he'd been sent by the Sword Saint, then he must be a prodigy. Ludian awkwardly said he had no idea what Kato saw in him. He wasn't anything special. But she was already pointing her greatsword at him and saying she'd be the one to find out. She slammed it into the ground and told him to come at her. She wanted to see the boy's talent. She said to give it everything he had because she was already in her final year. Adele stepped in to ask her to take it easy, but she elbowed him aside with a grin, saying she was going to devour the boy. Oliver and Claudia said they were also curious to see if he had the same talent as Sir Crooks. Meanwhile, Lubian was already on the ground, wondering where on earth all this fame was coming from. He hadn't fought for any of this. He just wanted to spend his time in peace. The girl thought that was his fighting stance and asked what his style was. Now he straightened up and said he fought in the Adora style, a sword-based martial art. She tossed her arm to the side, said she'd never heard of it, and told him to come on already. That got him motivated. He said it was a pleasure and went in for the first attack. She caught it on the block, the sword slid to the side, and she stepped in for a shoulder strike, but ended up dodging another. Then came the relentless sequence. Punch here, punch there, slash here, slash there. But everyone watching was commenting how disappointing it was. They'd thought this guy who had been recommended would be a legend, a genius. Instead, his movements were sloppy, his form was too light, and his attacks still lacked proper timing. Adi, hearing this, was already muttering about whether he should kill everyone for insulting the swordsmanship of the gods. Ludian told him it was just training, no need to worry. Then Adele told the boy to stop holding back, even though Ludian was thinking he was already giving it everything he had. He shot Karen a sharp look, and she seemed a bit confused. Everyone was saying he was fighting poorly, but even though his movements looked like they had no foundation, they were incredibly fluid, one attack flowing into the next, all in a chain of retaliation. She could tell his swordsmanship was designed purely for killing. He had the potential to get stronger, but that alone wouldn't be enough to catch Kato's attention, so there had to be something he hadn't shown yet. She activated her aura on her sword and jumped, saying she finished this now. The sly guy glanced under her skirt, threw his sword up to defend, and the clash sent dust flying across the arena. The loudmouths went silent, and Karen was impressed. That was a mana strike to block her attack, but using mana alone like that, she didn't know. He told her to shut up and said she was going too hard. She stepped back, and now his arm was trembling all over, shaking to the core. Now she understood why Katel had taken notice. He'd entered the school already knowing how to use mana without having royal blood or belonging to a great family. She said it all made sense now, and that's why he was a transfer student. She even lowered her head and said she'd apologize for it. But he wasn't about to just let it slide. He only told her he hoped nothing like that would happen again. She offered to grant him a wish as an apology, saying she didn't know what she'd been thinking. The bystanders were confused. Why was she so impressed? And why was she acting like that? Then suddenly someone arrived asking what the commotion was. Oliver was already apologizing to someone named Kepler, and the purple-haired girl looked awkward too. The guy placed his hands on Ludian's shoulders and apologized to Junior. Ludian was unsettled, because the Kepler family was one of the ones that betrayed the protagonist and tried to kill him during the war. The man was introducing himself all cheerfully, but Ludian knew the malice was in his heart. He apologized again while the purple-haired girl told Kepler to back off. She'd never asked for his help. He just turned to her and said that things like factions, families, or the fact Ludian was a new student shouldn't matter at all. On top of that, he said he'd come because of a request from Luciela, hearing that probably left her feeling awkward too. And Kepler told Ludian that because of this incident, he'd make sure to look after him. Another person wanting to take care of him. Enough already, he's got Katel, then Kalun, Abel, and now another one. Let the guy live. Still, for Ludian, this connection was different, because he wanted to find out what was behind this family. Do you want me to also rework the fight sequences in a slightly more dynamic way so it reads like a fantasy battle scene but still keeps the full length? That would make it flow more like an action novel. He gave a cheerful little smile, though it was obvious he was sizing them up on the inside. Sometime later, 80, looking a bit discouraged, said he'd been kind of lazy lately. That was because for him, it used to be normal to just sleep in a stable, but now that he had a nice bed, he just wanted to lie around all day. Still, he was feeling a bit down because he hadn't expected to hear the name Kepler in the school. Now our boy revealed that in the War of the Superhumans, a part of the story, the families fought among themselves, but it had nothing to do with demons. I'm a bit confused here. It had already been 3 days since he last spoke with Kepler, and not a single word since then. If that was the case, he'd have to make the first move. So Ludian said that if they ever came face to face with the demon clan, he would need his power. Diablo replied that he'd give him all the power he had. He wasn't about to let demons invade the world without his help. If they were the enemy, they had to lose. Ludian could tell this bastard was far too proud. That's when 80 said he seemed very interested in the Keplers. He answered that yes, he wanted those people on their side, because he knew that guy wasn't just some ordinary knight, but a superhuman. Honestly, it didn't seem all that rare to be a superhuman. But of course, the second interesting part was learning more about the secret organizations in the capital. Something related to those organizations had led to countless deaths during the war. The protagonist team had been able to move forward, but the Kepler family and the other nobles had distanced themselves. That war had divided humanity, and maybe if he could prevent it from happening, humanity would remain united, and the outcome could be different. Diablo understood that he was basically planning to use everyone as a shield. In the end, something Diablo liked as well. But he warned the boy that with the status and strength he currently had, he wouldn't accomplish anything. Still, Ludian simply picked up his sword, thinking that right now he was more interested in information. In time, he would grow stronger, but for now, it was time to start a tour around the capital. Sometime later, at night in the marketplace district, Kepler showed up saying the guards patrolled heavily here. It was dangerous. You could hardly believe those damn demons were controlling the streets like this. His sister said the information was correct. There was a connection between the demons and the temple. Her name was Maria Kepler, and from what I understood, they were planning to attack the nobles. But at the same time, they knew that if too many nobles died, there would be a lot of collateral damage. Maria, however, said the family had brought an important weapon to help with that. The item was called an Uparts-grade artifact. I don't know what that is, but it seemed to be something secret, because the man said the family was insane for using something like that. Then suddenly, Elvin Kepler, Bawan had been calling Kepler, but that's actually the family name, turned and said the two of them had important work to do in finding information about the demons. 2 second-year kids who honestly looked more like children just said, all right. Their names were Nell and Dell. Maria said it was a shame they didn't have as much talent as the Aruda family in detecting other people's energy. And I bet they were going to detect our boy as a demon. Elvin told Maria not to say things like that. It was all for the mission. Besides, soon they would be the ones in charge of everything. Walking through what they called the underworld, our boy noticed that even the poorest part of the city was still pretty developed. And he wanted to know what they were doing there, and he simply said nothing for now. At that moment, the secret organizations were probably starting to gain power from the shadows. Then he asked if Diablo could detect the clashes of energy within the capital. Diablo replied that was more than obvious. For now, Ludian was calm because in the capital, they weren't going to use demon-turned creatures like that Alex guy. The person he's most curious to find right now is someone named Gut von Belsted, a collaborator with the demons who will be one of the people behind Cato's death. While he was lost in those thoughts, someone put a hand on his shoulder. There was a beggar telling him to get out of there unless he wanted to pay a fee. Ludian smiled. His underworld guide had just appeared. He placed a hand on the man's shoulder, activating a spark of lightning, and the guide dropped to the ground. The man instantly realized Ludian was a knight. He knew how to use mana. Ludian told him that if he answered everything properly, he might just get out of this alive. He better speak up now. Which nobles had been walking through the capital's back alleys? Ludian was especially curious about the one with green hair. Back with the Keplers, Maria was commenting that Luciella seemed interested in Karen, which was bad for them. Elvin replied that Luciella wasn't their enemy. All she needed to do was stay neutral. She then asked if the new boy who'd entered the school could end up changing their plans. Elvin thought that the fact Karen had misjudged him and nearly lost to him showed the boy really had potential. But then he turned to his sister and told her not to worry. He was just a first-year rookie, and nothing was going to change because of him. She agreed and said that was true. Now it was time for them to carry on with the plan. What they didn't know was that our boy had already spotted them from above and was quietly watching them walk back and forth, trying to detect anything unusual. Those two children were something called mutants in this world. On top of that, the most powerful human in the superhuman war was there too, Maria Kepler. She was the final boss of that war. Damn, didn't expect that from her. Ludian asked Diablo if his disguise was perfect. Diablo said yes, but added that he felt this time it might be better to proceed with caution. The protagonist was certain something big was about to happen, since the two siblings were getting involved. The boy was perched up there acting like he was Batman, watching everything unfold. Then the green-eyed girl pointed out the Gremhart Theater. Elvin said he already knew that guy was involved. Those damn mages thought too highly of themselves, but they were always sticking their noses into things they shouldn't. Maria said that if it was him, it wouldn't be hard to deal with. He was probably just a minion and not a true high-level demon. Soon after, they were all heading inside. Nothing suspicious at all, right? With two dwarves standing at the entrance dressed like that. They immediately sensed something was going on the top floor, and they were going up anyway. Apparently, security was non-existent. The siblings said they could smell a terrible stench of blood and demonic energy. Then Elvin said he'd heard that this Viscount wasn't just some simple merchant. A long time ago, he had been named as one of the successors to the Magic Tower, but apparently he refused. Maria was certain this had to be a mage's study room. When they opened the door, a man with a cigar wanted to know what had brought such renowned academy students here. Elvin told him to drop the act. He knew full well it was him who'd been interfering with their plans. Cursed Viscount Gun von Belstad. The man laughed and asked if they were the ones attacking his operations, and then vanishing. Elvin shot back that the real criminal here was him, so he better cut the nonsense. The Viscount crushed his cigar, warning him not to mess with the merchants' union, or the entire family would pay the price. Elvin retorted that he was a demon, and told him he already knew everything. He drew his sword and said there wouldn't be a single demon left in the Empire once he started cleaning house. The man began to release an isolating aura, realizing this brat intended to interfere with his plans. He had no idea what 5 kids thought they could accomplish. But for him, this was over. Elvin looked confused. After all, there were only 4 of them. Then the sly one walked up with a smile, greeting the seniors and saying he'd come to talk to the friend who'd ignored him for 3 days. In the original story, this Gud von Belstad had corrupted a large part of the Empire, siding with the demons and gaining countless allies. He was one of the people who orchestrated the plot that ended the lives of the 2 Delphian dukes. His name was etched into history, and Ludian hadn't expected to run into him this soon. I can't quite make it out here. The translation messed with us. But I think it's either 4,000 in power or 34,000. That's a big difference. Lomina, our boy, said it was less than Alex, right? So it must be around 4,000. Maybe manageable after all. That's when Elvin pointed his greatsword at our boy's face, wanting to know his identity, asking if he was here as an ally or an enemy. Ludian said that obviously he was a friend, at least when it came to the senior's goals, dealing with that demon lackey. Elvin was startled. Only the top of the Kepler family should know something like that. That's when our boy said he belonged to a secret organization dedicated to maintaining world peace known as Adora. Eddie wanted to know why he was stealing his names now. Naturally, Elvin said he'd never heard of any such organization. Ludian replied that it was different from their organization, which he knew as the Psychic Empire. Now both siblings were tense. He even knew the name. The protagonist then said, "So I'm going to make you an offer. No matter how much you want to kill this guy right now, you can't take him out in a place full of people. That's because vassals of the Demon King can't be killed by physical force." Our boy knew that sending Maria showed they were focused on this, but the girl herself was still incomplete. Ludian said his offer was that he would help them take down Gud von Belstad. They would have to form an alliance, and he wanted to know what Miss Maria thought. She was trembling because it almost seemed like he knew she was the one in charge of this part of the operation. He'd followed her without her realizing, knew who the leader was, knew her name, he knew everything. That's why she refused. She said she would never make a deal with someone as suspicious as him. He'd better forget about an alliance because she wasn't even willing to let him leave without answering a lot of questions. She warned him that once they were done with Gud, he would be next. He and his system just raised a little hand in the corner, saying, "All right then, I'll just wait here." It seemed that this was an incident that had happened in the story as well. Ludian found it strange that the siblings were so willing to go through with this. At that moment, the villain finally asked if they were done talking. They better come at him with everything they had, or else he'd make sure they didn't leave alive. With that, he declared the festival open and sent an attack their way. Maria pulled something out from inside her abdomen, and a hourglass appeared before her. Suddenly, the entire space began to warp. In the blink of an eye, they were standing in a desert. Gud said he never expected an artifact capable of spatial interference to be in the hands of someone like her. But a change in terrain wouldn't make any difference for children like them. He was already using demonic energy, and they realized he was holding nothing back. A swarm of dark magic circles appeared, with creatures emerging from them. That's when they understood. The bastard was actually a summoner, which explained why he hadn't seemed so strong earlier. He transformed, warning them that they had no way of destroying that body of his. Ludian knew the problem wasn't his changing appearance. It was the fact that his power was surging. He had thought this was too easy compared to Alex, but now it made sense. His power had already climbed to 12,000. Gut told them they would pay dearly for stirring up the hornet's nest. Maria warned everyone to be careful. This guy they thought was just some low-level minion was actually stronger than most noble demons. And then a flood of monsters was already rushing toward them. She stretched out her hand, activating a golden magic, and he looked a bit surprised. A barrier formed, and any creature that touched it was instantly killed. Gub was confused. This woman had the same amount of mana as an ordinary person, so how was this possible? Maria asked if he truly hadn't noticed. Meanwhile, Ludian remembered that this girl had been the final boss of one of the last chapters. Back then, he couldn't even comprehend her full power. Damn, when she made a threat, she clearly had the authority to back it up. Her title was the Golden Empress. Gud was baffled. This wasn't the kind of power a mere human should have, but she was floating there, saying that from the looks of it, he would die without believing it until the very end. She raised her arms and declared that the outcome wouldn't change. Gud called for his minions and ordered them to finish her off, but the creatures seemed to hesitate. At that moment, he wondered if he was hallucinating. Something massive was forming above her hands. He asked her to stop, saying they could make a deal. He'd offer her complete control of the entire underworld. He could even arrange a treaty between her and his master. If she wanted, he'd give her his shares in a merchant group. She just laughed, saying he was interesting, and then brought her finger down. Looks like she dropped a stone-based spirit bomb right on the monsters. Her other title was the Queen of Physics, and there was the little system in glasses, watching everything. Seeing this dangerous woman, knew she had to be made into an ally. The monster was completely buried under rubble, and Elvin was already celebrating, saying he was dead, only for Ludian to tell him never to say those words. Better check if the guy was actually dead before throwing that curse around. The green-haired one replied that of course he was dead. No demon could survive that, and right on cue, his sunset form burst upward, tearing up the ground. When Maria looked again, a gray slime was already reforming into a new demon. God then said her power was interesting, but still not enough to kill him. Maria chuckled, admitting that in this situation, she should have prepared a bit more. But just because she couldn't destroy the body didn't mean there weren't other ways. She used psychic magic to make his entire body contort, saying all she needed to do was destroy him until the spirit inside shattered as well. The guy was writhing and screaming in agony, while Ludian thought it might have been better for him to just die quickly. But even after all that pain, he stood up and said that if his prediction was correct, her time was almost up. She must be running low on energy in her artifact, and manipulating space to that degree wasn't easy. And he was right, the artifact seemed to be down to its last drops. Then he said that once his master found out about this, he would intervene, and that would be the end of them. The worst part was that Maria knew it was true. If the man who had hired this person showed up, she wouldn't be able to handle him. That's when someone asked if she needed him to get involved. Of course, it was the sly one fully equipped. He said maybe a conversation between them could be possible again. He had warned her she wouldn't be able to kill him. The stubborn Maria insisted she didn't want an alliance with him. He replied that fine, he dropped the alliance, but how about adding a few other conditions? For example, that she wouldn't cause him any physical harm. I thought he'd ask for more, but he just commented that he knew she probably had some method to deal with that guy. However, he had an easier way. She said fine, she listened to him after seeing what he could do, but he better be ready in case he failed. Right away, our boy stepped forward, already calling for Diablo, who said that dealing with a low-ranking demon like that one would be easy. The little monster was still writhing, glaring at them until Ludian grabbed its face and drove his sword straight into its chest. God told him to stop being stupid. There was no pain that would make him give up. But then his energy started being absorbed. The protagonist said that his regeneration would be neutralized for a while. As the sword drained his energy, Ludian asked where all that confidence had gone. Maria couldn't quite understand how this was possible, but Ludian knew because even though breaking an immortality contract was difficult, it depended on the demon's level. And Diablo was a demon known as one of the 7 deadly sins, one of the strongest to ever reach the pinnacle. When immortality was neutralized, regeneration went down with it. God said it was impossible, but our boy just smiled and said it was very possible. A magic circle appeared, energy expanded, and that was the end of the chapter. Into the next one, it talked about God. He had been eliminated from the competition to become one of the counts. After that, he turned to magic in hopes of becoming the master of the next magic tower. But at a certain point, his growth stalled and he was removed from the succession line. Then a demon offered him power, and for someone who had already failed twice in life, it was hard to resist. The result was that he became one of the Demon King's puppets, but now he had disappeared. The protagonist understood how crushing it was to have your path blocked and to be unable to make progress. Still, that was no excuse to make a pact with demons. Now God's mana had risen again, 26, far less than the earlier peaks. But immediately, the curious one wanted to know how he had finished him off. That's when she noticed the sly one had a demonic sword. He showed it, just a little demon sword. What was the problem? Everyone had one of these. Of course, she said there was a huge problem. The mind gets corrupted. But he countered, saying he was fine, and she realized it seemed to be true. He insisted that if he were really a demon, that he would have just killed a demon. Diablo cut in, saying he'd seen demons kill demons countless times, so that wasn't an argument. Ludian just told him to shut up. Seeing the brothers' watchful eyes, Ludian told them to just ignore the situation. Maria decided that how he'd gotten the sword and how he'd stayed sane weren't important. She said she had reacted instinctively and apologized. She would have to keep her promise. Now she was curious to hear the boy's proposal. A short while later in Maria's dorm room, he was finally alone in a room with a woman. It had been a while since Rebecca. Only 4 men had been following him around before. She formally introduced herself as Maria Kepler. The boy then said his name was Ludian of Adora. Even the little system was staring. Since when was that his name? She said she didn't understand this whole thing about him seeking world peace with his so-called Adora group. Still, what he had done yesterday was impressive. Even so, she had doubts because even within their intelligence network, the name Adora didn't exist. He told her it was because it was a very small group made up only of elite individuals. She stood up angrily and said, "Fine then. What was the benefit of forming an alliance with him?" He lowered his head, thinking that since he knew the story, he had countless benefits to offer, but he would only reveal enough to make her accept. She mentioned the numerous secret societies on the continent, but Adora associated with very few, and the reason they had taken an interest in her was, first, because they were not evil. Second, they had a certain level of influence, and third, their goals aligned with hers. She replied that 1 and 2 were obvious. The part she didn't understand was the third. He probably didn't even know what her goal was, so how could he assume that? But Ludian said he knew her goal was to have psychic magic accepted by the people as one of the main schools of magic. I'd honestly thought she'd have a more impressive goal than that. It's kind of underwhelming. She was impressed, though, and he explained that it was obvious. She wanted to kill demons to demonstrate the strength of psychic powers to the imperial family, especially since very few people had any idea how deeply infiltrated they were. Then he added another piece of information. The neighboring kingdoms were also already full of demons. If she investigated, she would find what he was saying was true. Maria asked if they really were that deeply embedded in society. He said, of course. They had Gud as one of the heads of the Merchants Guild. A man who controlled over 20% of the logistics obviously wasn't doing it alone. And the important detail was that he was just a lackey. So if a mere lackey was that important, imagine the position of the real leaders. He went on to say that one of the benefits of an alliance would be that he'd pass along information about the demons without holding anything back. Second, he'd connect the Kepler family to high-ranking nobles. And third, he'd offer her ancient knowledge. That got her excited. She stood up eagerly, asking who was true. Earlier, we'd seen Adi ask whether this theory about psychic power was actually worth anything. Ludian replied that yes, anyone who studied that power would be interested in this kind of thing. Just like in the original story, her abilities were unbeatable, but the cost of using them was extremely high. He explained that psychics hadn't been able to develop a solution for that because they lacked the theory. This was a problem that plagued their entire generation, and he knew Maria would be interested. Back in the present, he told her that Adora had these texts. He asked what she was going to do. She was practically running a marathon in place, sweating and trembling. The scene shifted to the psychic's hideout in the Empire. Elvin asked if she was all right, seeing her staring at a pile of papers. She said yes. He said that damn Ludian was making things complicated, but she replied that there was no way to refuse something like that. He wanted to know who this boy really was. She answered that he seemed completely ordinary. His history was just like any commoner's, and there were plenty of records proving he lived in the same place all his life. Elvin said that was absolutely impossible. A human who could remain sane while wielding a demonic sword was not a normal person. She agreed, after all, to break the power of immortality, you need a sword with a high-ranking demon's core. She also wanted to know what this Adora business was, what was the true identity of that group. They had access to all the psychics' information, while the psychics had no clue who they were. Elvin said they just needed to keep an eye on the boy, and eventually they'd uncover his identity. She agreed, but added that the most important part of the negotiation was what they'd be receiving. If it turned out to be true, it would be an important key. Then she said she'd speak to him tomorrow, but they could deal with the rest afterward. On the way, though, they were curious to know which family our boy would introduce them to. Elvin said it was obvious. He'd take them to the Iskra people, since that was the city he'd come from. Maria, fixing her hair and towering over others, said they'd find out tomorrow. The next chapter began with Addie crouched on top of a post Fang showing, while our boy was waiting for those troublemakers. He was wondering how he should prepare and what the demons would do once they found out Gud had disappeared. On top of that, he wanted to know why those two weirdos were always sticking close to him. The kids just said it was Maria's order, so there wasn't much they could do about it. He asked if they were his spies, but they said no. They were there to join his faction. He couldn't help but think that this so-called faction didn't even exist. And he knew that Karen and the Kepler family seemed to have some sort of rivalry. If she saw this scene, she wouldn't like it one bit. That's when the two of them arrived and called out to Ludian, wanting to know who he was going to introduce them to. He just told them to stay calm. They'd find out when they got there. The scene shifted to a garden in the Imperial Palace where Luciella arrived and greeted the prince. Nearby was Miss Citri, one of the Viscount's daughters. She greeted Luciella, who stood still among the leaves, and the prince told her to respond. She said it had been a while since she'd last seen Miss Citri, and Citri replied that yes, it had been since the last event. Suddenly, Prince William asked why she was visiting at this time when he'd given her so many missions. She said she was there to deliver information about Gud's disappearance, and right then the man pulled a letter from his hand, saying they were finally uncovering who had harmed his parents. He told Citri not to worry, that he would get to the bottom of things and find out who the traitors were. I still didn't understand why Luciella was trembling and looking around like that. Maybe it was because that fool of a prince was forcing her to do all this just to please Citri. Who knows? The scene then changed to the Information Guild's headquarters. The place was busy, packed with people. Maria asked if the person they were looking for could only be found through this place. He looked a bit awkward, saying they'd understand everything soon but asking her not to mention certain names out loud. I thought that was a good idea. Then he said he wanted to meet the master of the Information Guild. The man at the counter asked if he had an appointment, and our boy told him to just mention the name Ludian. Moments later, the man was apologizing for not recognizing such esteemed guests. The master had been expecting them. The two of them looked confused. Neither knew who the master of the Information Guild was. Then someone said they had finally arrived, and the fools were wondering why she was there. Behind the desk sat Luciella. Yep, this dangerous girl. She had that innocent-looking face, but she was dangerous in more ways than one. We'd seen just a bit earlier that when Ludian arrived, she came over looking beautiful, adjusting her hair, turning slightly, swaying her hips, and saying she was happy to see he was doing well. She asked how life was in the dormitory. He replied with a bright smile, saying it was so good he could live there 365 days a year. She laughed, then mentioned an incident that had happened recently. He said the place must be in chaos and that she must have a lot of work to do, that her shoulders, as the master of the guild, must be carrying a heavy load. She lowered her eyes to say something, and that's when she realized he had just called her the master of the guild. Clearly, they weren't supposed to know that. He repeated himself, saying he knew she was the master of the Information Guild. She immediately grabbed her sword, drew it, and pointed it at his neck, telling him to say who he really was. He awkwardly replied that she knew better than anyone. He was Colleen's squire. He hadn't expected her to lose her composure like this just over a bit of information. She demanded that he tell her how he knew she was the master of the Information Guild. The boy was about to launch into a long explanation, but basically he said he knew the Empire would need someone influential, young, and powerful for the role, so he concluded it had to be her. She smiled, saying it was a good deduction, but that still didn't explain how he was certain. That's when our boy revealed that the paper about Gud's disappearance had been leaked by him. In other words, he was the one who'd taken Gud down. Luciella looked confused and stared at him, clearly not believing he could have actually pulled that off. He kept insisting, but she just told him to stop joking around. That wasn't something you should say. Our boy, however, said he never claimed he'd done it alone. Obviously, someone who had just entered the academy wouldn't be able to pull that off without help. He could reveal how he knew her identity, who had helped him on that mission, and how he also knew about the demons. All of that, he said, would be revealed tomorrow at the Information Guild, and that's where we are now. The two Kepler siblings were baffled to learn that Luciella was the master of the Information Guild. She had her hand to her face, saying she was also surprised she'd gotten herself into this situation. Had it really been them who killed Viscount Gud? Ludian clung to Elvin and said that over the past week, they had worked together to track that guy down. Thankfully, everything had gone smoothly. Of course, when they killed him, they had also gathered countless pieces of information, one of which was the name of the young lady. She looked confused, wanting to know what her name had to do with anything. That's when Ludian explained that the third prince had been chosen to expand the demon's influence throughout the Imperial Academy. This would happen because the Viscount had adopted a certain woman who apparently was draining the prince's energy and planting wicked thoughts in his head. From the looks of it, Luciella was already set to marry that prince, but in the original story, when she was linked to the names in Gud's dealings, she lost that engagement and the prince ended up marrying that other crazy woman. He then said that all of this information had been uncovered by this incredible trio right here. I was just as confused as Lucilla, but going along with it. She said she could believe the story, but there were two strange things. How had they managed to find demons the information guild itself couldn't locate, and how had they dealt with that man's power? Ludian said someone else would answer that. That's when Maria stepped forward full of confidence, while Ludian just wanted to see what would happen between the two. She revealed she was from the group known as the Luminous Psychics. Lucille was caught off guard. She hadn't even known this group existed. The Information Guild might as well close its doors at this point. Maria explained that she didn't have much information to share because their group wasn't particularly grand. It was just a gathering of people who liked psychic magic. The blue-haired one still looked confused, while the green-haired one demonstrated by making a chair float. This was the familiar form of psychic power people knew. But with a simple clench of her fist, that same chair completely disassembled, turning into a stone on the floor. Luciella admitted it was truly fascinating. She knew this type of power existed, but not at that level. She picked up the stone and said she was impressed. She never imagined a fairy tale-like ability would just appear in front of her like this. She said she could believe this power was enough to defeat God, but questioned why they had come there just to share this information. What were their real intentions? That was Ludian's cue to make his move. The three of them backed down on one me, saying they wanted her to sponsor them. A little while later, she was pacing back and forth because they had already requested that psychic power be recognized on equal footing with magic. On top of that, they had offered her their support, and with both forces combined, our boy said it would be far more effective to wipe out the demons. Lucilla looked out the window, thinking she had nothing to lose. The demons were infiltrating the capital, and now a power capable of destroying them had fallen right into her lap. She said fine, but she would have to consult with her family first. The three of them, keeping their composure, replied that in that case they would wait. A while later, outside, Maria wanted to know how he had already figured out that Lucilla was the master of the Information Guild, and whether Adora had any other members of royalty among its ranks. The sly one was acting all smooth, saying those questions couldn't be answered. Their alliance never revealed any cards. After all, he was the only wild card in this mess, and they couldn't know something like that. But to keep their spirits up, he told them to watch closely. He would make sure the Empire recognized psychic power as one of its pillars. Maria, fixing her hair a little, asked why he was going so far for them. He said he didn't want to see them living in the shadows, but following the path they truly wanted. Otherwise, they would eventually meet their ruin, and they didn't deserve such a cruel fate. The two of them were left confused. He spoke as if he knew the future, but the truth was far simpler. Maria Kepler was his favorite character, the very same Maria standing in front of him. The problem was that in the original story, she died as part of the protagonist's team, and he wanted to change that. Later that night, in a carriage, someone was asking who was behind all this. With fewer eyes around, she asked if Citri already knew who it was. The smoke-like demon sitting in the carriage replied that there was no information at all. It seemed they had received word from someone named Rohan, and perhaps it was connected. The woman said the whole business about the body of the old man who had died was ridiculous. She didn't believe the story about Castley's mana powers being found near the Empire's borders. Castley's power, the same one our boy had taken in that first dungeon where he met Eddie. She laughed, saying that if no one had been able to get any information, then it must mean they used either a magic artifact or psychic magic. She ordered them to track every person who could have been involved and pass along the information. Of course, we already knew who, none other than the ribbon-wearing temptress, Citri, the one draining the poor prince dry. Sometime later in the training grounds, our boy knew he had 5 years to prepare before the real story began. By then, he needed to be at the level of Sword Master. Some guys passing by told Ludian not to train so hard, to take a break, maybe go party for a night. He thought that even the people in this region seemed decent. He had assumed all nobles were trash like Kalain. I honestly thought Kalain would stick around for the entire story, but once the boy entered the academy, we never heard from him again. At least our boy wasn't naive. He knew everyone was treating him well only because Lucilla was supporting him. Then the broccoli called out to him, immediately commenting on how much he trained. Ludian was already wondering why this guy had shown up, had Maria sent him a message. The other boy then mentioned he had heard about Ludian's duel with Karen, that he used mana. Ludian figured there must be spies watching him, but the guy said no. He had heard it directly from Karen herself. He bought her a big ice cream, and she told him everything about the duel and exactly what Ludian had done. On top of that, Ludian had misunderstood. He and Karen were enemies. They had known each other since childhood. Not only that, they had even promised to marry each other. But things had gotten awkward when they started competing for the same position. That led to a falling out, and it was then that he decided to join Maria as her sword master disciple and help her build her empire. However, if he could become a supporter of the Delphian house, there would be no reason for him to become a sword master. Ludian was wondering why this guy was telling him all of this. Wasn't he even a little curious about him? Elvin then said that Ludian was strange. His swordsmanship was awful, and he didn't even know how to behave in a duel. But even so, he had something that shouldn't have been possible, and that was the point. Once again, he pointed his greatsword right at Ludian's face. The next chapter started, and I have to admit, I'm still missing Rebecca. Maria arrived and someone asked if they had mentioned the name Adora. They couldn't trust someone whose motives weren't clear. Maria said the psychic power theory they had presented was legitimate. Every researcher agreed it was far more advanced than their own theories, something from a much more developed era. Her father said her point was valid, but reminded her that all those who sought world peace never lasted until the end. She should never forget that in 1,000 years, no one in the Empire had achieved something like that. This was Matthias Kepler, her father, telling her to also remember that there was no record of the other things Ludian had presented, which made them even more suspicious. She said she knew, but then remembered the boy's smile, saying it had convinced her he wasn't fake. She confronted her father, saying the boy had fulfilled his part of the deal, so she had honor hers, even if he was a dangerous boy. Her father said fine. If she was that motivated, then she should be the one to deal with this Adora organization. He also mentioned something about them using something called the Green World, which made him suspicious. In the game's lore, the title was 7 colors, and one of those colors was green, an artifact that represented psychic power. The problem was, our boy didn't have psychic power, nor did he possess that artifact. I'm not sure, maybe we'll find out later. We jump back to the moment when the guy once again put his greatsword to Ludian's face. His brother immediately demanded to know how Ludian knew the family possessed the Green World. Ludian asked if that was really a problem, and the guy replied that of course it was fewer than 10 people should even know it existed. It seemed Ludian had suggested Maria use that item, which left her confused. How could he possibly know about it? The boy was acting far from innocent. Ludian said he didn't see it as a big deal. He'd never said he would steal the item. Besides, he had acquired his power honestly. They accepted his proposal, knowing that psychic powers gained through the Green World remain locked at the beginner level. Wait, when exactly did he gain that power? We weren't going to find out, or so I thought. But then, there was the little system lying on his head, just chilling. After killing that Viscount, our boy had taken a pile of study books. Not long after, the siblings noticed he was wandering around collecting abilities, and the most suspicious thing was that he knew too much about their family. He had the feeling that getting involved with this boy meant something terrible was coming. Ludian was impressed. This guy seemed to have a sixth sense. Maybe he should recruit him too. Ludian then admitted that yes, Elvin was right. He was collecting abilities. And just like with Abel, he needed several allies. He said he could prove both his innocence and his goals, telling Elvin that if he could track his every move, he'd have no reason to be suspicious. Broccoli asked what he meant, and Ludian said he would prove they were in a genuine alliance. That was much better than starting a fight that could destroy their partnership. Our boy wanted to make him an ally, but Eddie was already thinking about making him a slave. Elvin finally said fine, he'd keep an eye on Ludian for a while longer, but he better not try anything sneaky. For Ludian, that was fine. He had no intention of leaving this guy's side anyway, until he returned to his room and found the guy inside moving into his dorm. Someone please call Rebecca. Ludian complained, saying the dorm rules only allowed one person per room. But the guy replied that as one of the Academy's prodigies, he had enough authority to make it happen. On top of that, Ludian would actually benefit, since he'd be teaching him a lot. Our boy just stared at him like, learn from you. But keep in mind, this guy actually was kind of a boss in the real story, so maybe he does have something to teach. Elvin Kepler, 24 years old, 4,100 power. For the amount of stats he has, that's actually pretty low. Looks like the poor guy's starving, but still wants to act all high and mighty. Just get rid of that green hair already. At least he could beat Alex easily and good too, before the transformation. Maybe, for his age, he really did deserve to be called a little monster. And Elvin says it was our boy who offered to let him keep an eye on him anytime. So Ludian gives up and says fine, his help is always welcome. Elvin sits down right away and says he's got a little plan for him. Right now, the two of them are too weak. Trying to face demons would be like putting your head in a tiger's mouth. His plan is to get a helmet that wouldn't break even if the tiger bit down. Ludian's a bit lost about what he means, but a little while later, we're talking to Lucilla again. That tall one with the innocent-looking face says that, in the name of Duke Delphion, she accepts the proposal. They should serve with loyalty and honor the imperial family. Then she tells Elvin that, as proof of their alliance, he'll also start being trained by Keitel. Apparently, he didn't like that news because he looks a little shaken. She then wants to know what Ludian is going to do from now on, and suddenly she walks up real close and stares him down. He leans in and whispers that Viscount Belstead gave his adopted daughter to the third prince. That little bit of information made everything clear. Right away, Lucilla asks if he's trying to say that girl is connected to the demons. He says maybe, at the very least, it's worth investigating why. Not to mention, connected to demons or not, a parasite like her should be removed. Well, that's pretty dark of him. And the other ones, they're crying like she's losing her mind. Clearly, the girl's got some mental issues, but still saying parasites really do need to be eliminated. Even 80 shows up, telling our boy he's the real demon here. Lucilla calms herself down and says she wants to know what the next steps are. He tells her the demons have already infiltrated both the army and the nobility. The first goal is to make them show themselves, and right after that, cut off all the limbs. But for that, he needs to get stronger, and there's a dungeon that'll be perfect. Lucilla says he must be crazy. You should know that here in the capital, there shouldn't be any dungeons. But he replies that actually the dungeon is right here in the capital. In fact, there are 3, but 2 of them have nothing to do with demons, so he's leaving those out. He says he and Elvin will handle this one. That place was perfect to kickstart his plans, and now here we are in the catacomb of the end. Compared to the Minotaurs that welcomed him last time, this place only has a few skeletons. And apparently, Lucille has been here before, having fun with it. People are smiling way too much for a place that's supposedly for farming. Meanwhile, those 2 fools in the background are asking when it's their turn. They were here to gain experience, while Ludian's thinking things have gone wrong. They shouldn't even be here because there's something important he needs to take for himself. A bit earlier, we saw Lucilla in good spirits, thinking about this whole dungeon business. She was apparently shocked to learn there was one in the capital. She had no idea. But now she's glowing with excitement, saying she finds the information fascinating. She's throwing out all kinds of theories, saying it's going to be amazing, while he's already wanting to temper her excitement. But nope, she's already swinging her arm around, saying she's looking forward to the adventure. She'll get ready and bring everything she's got. Ludian knows that if she joins in, it'll make things much easier. The problem is there's a certain loot he doesn't want to share. That's when Elvin comments that the princess, the one standing beside the prince, is strong, so any help is welcome. And right then, Maria stretches and says that if that's the case, she's coming too, since her body feels a little stiff. The girls are already all excited with Luciella, saying they want to see psychic power in action. Meanwhile, Ludian believes they had already decided everything on their own. Once in front of the catacomb, Luciella shows up fully prepared. She's brought a mithril sword, a silver dagger, a purification item. And even though she's a specialist with large swords, she's using the smaller one this time since the place is cramped. Ludian takes the chance to ask if she knows where he can sell gold honestly. She answers that the ducal house can buy a decent amount. He's been storing it all ever since that dungeon because he's afraid people will notice he took everything and end up killing him. Still, she comments that the Kepler merchant group isn't weak. Maybe, if he was in a bad situation, he should sell to them. He then glances back and Lucilla notices they've never truly been on the same side. They both tense up and she comes right up to his face in a Yandir way, telling him that later he'll have to explain. His luck is that she already trusts what he says. He just thanks her and says it's time to head into this dungeon. Meanwhile, Eddie tells the boy to stop lying because lies have short legs. A little later, they're in front of a massive tunnel that seems endless. She tells him to explain the place and he says he doesn't really know either. Apparently, there was supposed to be a gravedigger here, but the man vanished. Many people from the past were buried there and the place was abandoned. For mages specialized in necromancy, this would be the perfect spot. She asks if that's the case, but he explains that actually it's a being from the nether world. Out of the 7 colors in the game, the nether world symbolizes black. These are creatures that gain access to this world with the help of demons, and their plan is to raise the dead and gain more influence. Luciella says he's crazy for wanting to come here with just Elvin, but he says it's not that hard. They'll understand soon. The well-endowed one walks ahead saying she's excited, so they should hurry up. And just like that, we're watching her cut down the monsters. The creatures don't stand a chance, even as they scream that they'll get their revenge. She just smiles and slashes their throats. A cruel girl. These monsters had 3,000 combat points, yet she was killing them easily. She's drenched in sweat, saying this place is relieving her stress. He's feeling pretty relaxed himself just watching her. The only problem is that the sheer number of creatures here is insane. Luciella says she doesn't really like places like this, where quantity outweighs quality. It's boring. Right then, Maria says it's fine. She'll clear the way since there's nothing worth keeping alive. With a simple clench of her hand, all the monsters fall apart. Luciella praises her, saying it looked like the power of a mage cutting through, but the other, embarrassed, says it was nothing special. Ludian, though, is realizing he's not doing anything, and the 2 of them are going to end up with all the rewards. He doesn't care about most of it, but there's one thing he can't lose. That cursed thought. He's mentioned it 3 times now. Suddenly, there's a frightening sound from the door, and an energy pulses through it. Clearly, this is a far stronger nether creature, but the girls are clinging together, blushing, saying they'll take the lead and hopping ahead. The 2 clueless ones are still wondering what they're even doing there. Moments later, they're in a room with what looks like a quadrillion skulls scattered across the floor. It feels like some kind of coliseum or arena, but Ludian says it looks more like an execution hall. Those weren't spectators watching the center, but people who had been executed. Suddenly, a nether monster appears in the middle of the dungeon, asking how they found him there. Elvin recognizes the creature immediately as a Baphomet, which roars that it's a servant of the Demon King. Maria says the thing is disgusting, while the sword guy says this monster looks like its body was damaged when it crossed the portal. Ludian finds that strange because the creature actually seems fine, but Diablo insists there's no way the monster would be chatting with a human if it were at full strength. He warns the boy that this thing will probably try to negotiate, use some kind of temptation, or trick them. The perfect trap for a human to fall into, and then it's over. Suddenly, though, the Baphomet shouts that they're cursed humans and he's going to kill them all. Ludian says Diablo was wrong, and Diablo just replies that he should be careful because this creature has cursed magic. The worst one is that right before dying it can use a reverse summoning to the nether world. Ludian, however, seems more interested in something else the monster is carrying, Could that sword be soft? I don't know, because the thing is already charging. The essence the monster possesses. Seeing the attack coming, Elvin knows that a single touch from that sword would destroy him. The monster comes for our boy first, but Maria uses her magic to create that golden shield. At first I thought she made a barrier, but she actually placed it on everyone. Damn, she's the real deal. Ludian figures that with her there, this can be handled. Lucilla and Elvin rush at the boss. They slash at its ankles as they pass, making the monster groan. Maria is almost bored of saying this was way less impressive than she expected. Our boy thinks that his original plan was to use Diablo's power, but with so many people here, it's not even necessary. That is, until he sees the creature actually has a combat power of 113,000. Oh wait, no, that's with 100,000 less than normal because most of its stats were nerfed when it crossed the portal. Maria notices this and says the monster seems to be under some restriction. It makes her feel like it's hiding something. Maybe that strange black crystal floating in the air above. That catches Ludian off guard. He can't feel any mana or spiritual energy coming from it. Maria says to just destroy it first and figure it out later. The fight continues with the creature swinging a heavy blow at Elvin, while Luciella mutters about wanting to bring her Giadelica, probably her sword. Ludian notices only suckers name their swords like he does. But enough of that, he jumps into the fray. Diablo tells him to drive the blade into its heart to absorb some energy. Yet again, someone slashes its ankle. Seriously, that's the only move these kids seem to use. The monster makes a cut but seems to miss, while Elvin moves quickly underneath it. The Baphomet is getting frustrated. He knows these kids shouldn't stand a chance. It roars that it won't forgive any of them. Our boy warns everyone that's probably about to cast a curse before dying. Everyone thanks him for the heads up, and he sneaks in from behind again, saying he'll finish it fast. The monster lands a direct hit on Elvin, who at least manages to block it. But Elvin still wants to know if Ludian really thought the two of them could handle this. Ludian tells him to stop complaining, and the Baphomet grows even more annoyed, confused about that barrier. Then it realizes it's because of the human girl and blames her. It goes to attack Maria, but our boy jumps in. Guess what? More ankle slashes. Finally, the leva handle technique works, and the monster drops to its knees. Took long enough. The Baphomet screams that if it had more time, winning would have been easy. Elvin says the thing is weird, incredibly weak, and just keeps whining. But the monster smiles and says it won't disappear that easily. Even if it has to put everything on the line, it won't let the ones humiliating it leave unscathed. Everyone there would be taken along with the demons. Ludian is startled. Why was this creature even mentioning demons? Here's another monster. Then the Baphomet tosses his sword aside. Lucilla wonders if the beast has given up fighting, but the monster is grinning in a twisted way. Everyone looks up when he stretches his arm and stabs himself in the chest. Right away, Maria warns them to be careful. This monster had taken its own life to remove its restrictions. In theory, that shouldn't even work, right? If you take your life, you die. But maybe there's some extra little power involved. In a flash, she lifts everyone off the ground in little spheres and sends them away. Meanwhile, the beast is shouting that he offers all the life and mana he possesses. He begs the gods not to ignore this goat's plea, literally calling himself a goat. He calls upon the gods beyond the stars, and once again, no one really understands what he's talking about. Those monsters beyond the stars are the galactic creatures that appear in Chapter 3 of the story. But why would the Baphomet have any connection to those beings? It would be even worse if he could actually summon them. The sphere in the middle of the room starts rising higher, pulling in more energy. Ludian realizes he's done something stupid. Diablo warns him that the monster is using some sort of trick. Since he can't summon the king, he's turning to something else. He explains that gods from other dimensions are hard to summon. But alien gods exist in this dimension, so they're easier to call upon. The problem is, alien gods have no connection to this planet, so if they come here, the only thing they'll do is destroy everything. Ludian realizes they're in real trouble, because this is the first time Diablo actually seems scared. The Baphomet keeps shouting for the ritual to continue. At this point, they should be striking the stone, hitting him, doing something, but instead, they're just standing there saying how terrifying it is. Finally, thank you, Maria. She says she's going to attack, because they can't allow that orb to remain there. But Ludian tells her to wait a bit, let him summon whatever it is first, so they'll have a story to tell later. He claims that messing with it now will cause a massive explosion. The Baphomet seems to be smiling while his energy is drained. Maria, sharp as ever, says she doesn't have the power to deal with what's coming. But he's playing the hero, smiling at her, and saying the continent won't fall that easily. She tells him to wake up. It's not the time for speeches. Honest girl. Stelly says he's going to carve his words into the creature's heart. Could have done that a while ago, right? Honestly, it seems like he actually wants this thing to arrive so he can steal the energy from this otherworldly being. Diablo says the boy has finally realized the greatness he possesses. He asks Maria if she's ready and she says fine. He walks off, saying he'll be right back. He asks how much time he has, and Diablo tells him at most 1 minute and 30 seconds. Ludian says okay, but a little extra, like 30 seconds, would be nice. His sword starts filling with aura, and he says that every time he uses this power, it feels like his life shortens. Diablo says yes, and that's amazing. Being able to use such a power for just a few years of life is worth it. Only now does Luciela notice our boy has a demonic sword. All the two brothers nearby are saying they want to see how long he can stay sane using something like that. Luciela asks why everyone knew except her. But by then, Luvian's already rushed forward and struck what looked more like a blue orb than the monster's body. He keeps gripping the sword's handle, thinking Maria's barrier should be enough. He delivers a slash, and it seems like he cut through the barrier protecting the goat. The monster tells the creature to get away while asking what kind of energy that was. At that moment, the monster recognizes Diablo standing before him and asks why he's here if he was sealed during the War of Angels. Diablo says that because he knows that the monster really does need to be killed. Our boy unleashes a massive upward strike toward the monster's neck, and it looks like it goes right through its body. Meanwhile, Diablo tells the Baphomet to go back to the Demon King and send him his regards. The creature rides in agony. The crystal is still up in the air, and its energy starts getting drained until it's all skinny and shriveled. But Luvian has a bit of a problem. He wants to transfer demonic energy to 80, not Diablo. After all, if that bastard gets stronger, it could be dangerous. In the end, it absorbs so much that all that's left is dust. The big crystal that was floating in the sky falls to the ground and shatters. Luvian relaxes, saying it's over, but Diablo tells him no, there's still something left. Everyone looks up, wondering what it is. And then, bam, a Cyclops appears. Actually, it has 3 heads and an arm full of eyes. Not even Ludian, with his knowledge of the future, knows what it is. In the expansion about the space creatures, they're more like squids. None of them have a humanoid shape. Diablo says this isn't what the goat was trying to summon. It's something much more dangerous. Ludian already knows the obvious. They're screwed. But what's he going to do? The thing starts shrinking a bit, then comes up to them and begins speaking in some incomprehensible language. Even Ludian has no idea what it's saying, but 80 translates, wearing her little glasses and all, telling them that the creature says there's no need to look so scared. Unlike the others, it's not here to fight. Ludian is surprised, but quickly points out that 80 kind of looks like an alien herself, so it makes sense she can understand it. She tells him to show some respect, saying that's just cruel. She's an incredible artificial intelligence with multi-skills. So our boy asks 80 to tell the creature to change into something more humanoid instead of keeping that terrifying form. Since it's from another world, the creature can see 80, and it starts speaking back in that strange way. 80 comes back and says the creature says it's hard to mimic the human body because it's too simplified. Suddenly, the monster starts lowering itself, saying that this language is difficult. Wait, is it turning into a girl? She then calls our boy the Chosen One and 80 the Sealed One. Together, the two make a very interesting pair, and that's why she'll follow him for now. So now we got a humanoid 3-headed Cyclops for anyone out there with that particular preference. Look, my friend, what are you going to do? The whole group is kind of confused. She gives them a hard stare, and Ludian has no idea what this crazy woman is talking about. What's even stranger is that he doesn't remember any god or cosmic creature that goes by the name Yev. Then Diablo says he knows countless gods who took part in the Celestial War, but he has no idea who she is. On top of that, her stats were incredibly high, maybe even enough to make him take a step back. Ludian is confused. Even Diablo, who's usually so confident, looked unsettled. And on top of everything, she's from an alien world, not just from the Nether Realm. The real problem is that one move from her could destroy all the plans they've been working on. Diablo then says it's actually a good thing she's that strong, because if she starts causing chaos, the gods might have to step in. Obviously, that doesn't make him very excited. It doesn't exactly sound like good news. Then Maria comments that the crystal was probably acting as some kind of barrier or something like that. And on top of that, Baphomet himself was hiding there, so maybe there was a reason for it. Luvian knows that this essence was the way to obtain the power of dark energy. So that's how Abel managed it. When he broke the crystal, he thought, that would be the moment he'd finally pull it off. But now the plan's completely fallen apart, and there's not much he can do about it. He steps to the side and reaches for Baphomet's sword, which falls right in front of him, and he commands it to shrink. Once it's tiny, he picks it up and hands it to Elvin. Honestly, I thought our boy was about to turn into a full-on Kirito 2.0 with those little swords. Broccoli, though, is kind of unsure. Can he really accept something like this? His peaceful self says he already has this one here, and it's much better. Maria says maybe Luciela would want it, since she's the one who uses a big sword. She's shaking a little, saying it's fine, he can take it, she already has her own. Elvin says alright then, and if that's how it is, he'll keep it for himself. And for our boy, even though it doesn't have Baphomet's essence, it's not like it was a waste. He got some experience and leveled up a bit. Man, our boy's sitting at 1,920, basically broke. That Alex from the start had 3,500. Or maybe his power is glitched, because according to him, that amount of mana is what a high-ranking mage would have. That's when Luciela asks how they're going to deal with this girl who just showed up, staring them down like she's trying to figure out the problem. She then asks if Yev is going to keep following Luvian, and he says yes. He explains that she can even hide her identity or something like that. The problem is, she doesn't know why this girl appeared. what she's doing here, or why she's interested in Ludian. And what's even scarier is the indifference she's showing toward everyone else's presence. It's almost like nobody is a threat. Yeah, only our boy knows how powerful she really is. They should kind of know, though, the girl was born from a cosmic monster. Ludian asks why she's going to follow him, and she replies that it's fun. Seems like everyone just wants to follow him for that reason. Maybe she'll turn into equipment, become an earring hanging from his ear. It's exactly what our boy's thinking, especially since Diablo said the same thing about her being interesting. What he doesn't understand is why every divine being thinks his path is going to be so entertaining. He just wanted to survive. He crouches down and asks if she's going to interfere with what he's trying to do, and she says no, because that would be fun. And besides, it might be a hassle. He asks her to explain, but she says she's not in the mood. Probably because she doesn't want to interfere so the gods won't interfere with her interference. Then our boy starts giving orders, saying that if she's going to follow him, she can't use her power under any circumstances. Everyone there agrees, saying it's a good idea. On top of that, she should absolutely hide her power so no one even knows she's there. After all, he doesn't want any other powerful people being drawn to her strength. She glances oddly to the side and says fine. Then he says he has one last request, and the scene cuts to a noble shouting, demanding to know what's going on. A man crouching down apologizes to his master, saying Baphomet's barrier was too powerful and now it's hard to understand the situation. The limping man, who already looks like a demon despite being human, wants to know who the bastard was. He's told the documents came from Lady Lucilla, but he refuses to believe it, saying that the wretch who reeks of milk wouldn't be capable of something like that. And for him, the worst part isn't even that Baphomet is dead, it's that he died without them having the slightest idea someone was plotting to kill him. He starts activating his power, saying that the result of Baphomet's death should have been the destruction of half the capital. Then he calls for the cursed Asmodeus, asking when she's going to deal with Lucilla. And wow, this is the goddess of lust, but now I'm actually scared. She looks more like some kind of dealer. What the hell is this? And she simply asks why it would be her fault for whatever that damn Lucilla does. Her target is the third prince, not that woman. She had been giving them trouble, but the most important thing right now was finding out who took down Baphomet along with her. That's because, obviously, there's no way she could have handled that alone. The man knows she had help, and Asmodeus agrees, saying they urgently need to find out who's interfering so much with their plans. He's seething with rage because once Baphomet had recovered, they were going to take his power and then attack the city. She suggests it might have been intentional, but he says there's no way it was just a coincidence. Nobody should have known about this plan. They had barely begun to act. Asmodeus then licks her lips, saying fine. Up until now, she's let Lucilla do whatever she wanted, only acting as a rival in love. But it looks like she'll have to deal with that wretch herself. Thank God we're about to get a fight between two powerhouse women for us to enjoy watching. Look at her walking through the academy with everyone calling out to her, saying she was summoned by the Emperor because of the incident. Elvin tells our boy that he's barely arrived and he's already pretty popular, but he says it's not really his fault. It's Lucilla's fame mixed with all these incidents. Elvin says he knows, but they should start being careful or they'll end up getting killed by demons. What he's really curious to know, though, is who the mage is that's in contact with Belstad's daughter, Citri Belsid, who's got two massive beast-like guards for protection. It seems Ludian doesn't want to get involved with her because she's very strong, and in the original story, the protagonist only deals with her around the second chapter. For now, the plan was to cut off the demon's arms one by one. After all, they were using the same methods, so it was easy to predict their moves. The only problem was the one question that remained. How exactly did they open the demon portal in the story? The first kingdom they conquered was the Rohan region. However, the portal actually first opened in the Mauryan Empire. One thing they know for sure, whatever method they used to open that gate, well, they either still can't do it, or they would have done it already, which means there's something in this empire they're looking for. At that moment, someone calls out to him. It's Maria, asking if he has a moment for her. She's all flustered and blushing. Why? Forget that, girl, let's just head to the restaurant. Now Yev's at his side too. He's even offering some ice cream to the space girl, while Maria is standing there awkwardly, saying she wanted to apologize. He asks why, and she says that in Baphomet's dungeon, she should have helped more. She promised to protect him, but didn't manage to. He thinks that's strange because if it weren't for her barrier, they wouldn't have been able to pull it off at all. But still, just helping wasn't enough. Her pride had taken a hit. While Yev enjoys her ice cream, he's thinking Maria is even more stubborn than he imagined. Sure, she's strong, but it was reckless to deal with that Baphomet who had literally struck his own chest to trigger that reverse summoning. Out of nowhere, Ludian asks what she thinks of their relationship. She stands there looking a bit awkward, and he says they're great comrades, right? Oh boy, she's trembling now. Looks like she didn't like that whole comrade thing. She wanted something more. He asks if she doesn't like being battle partners, and she's fidgeting from side to side, cheeks completely red. Ludian thinks she's blushing because she's not used to having a battle partner, but I don't think that's the reason at all. To give her a little confidence boost, he says he knows that if she'd gone all out, she could have beaten that creature on her own. She's extremely strong, and he's certain she could handle all sorts of problems. He's there praising her, praising Lucilla, saying Baphomet would have been easy, but she still doesn't cheer up. Then he says she really is arrogant, and just like that, she's startled, and that blush is gone in an instant. Then he says that this kind of behavior from her will only end up making her suffer in this world. She may have never had someone to call a friend or any comrades to rely on, but eventually she's going to have to learn that she can't carry all the responsibility by herself. Damn, Ludian's really hitting her with some aggressive philosophy here. What's going on? In the original story, she was also known as the Lonely Princess, since she managed all the psychics alone. But managed is a strong word. It was more like a fragile house of cards that could collapse at any moment. Then he says he wants to ask something. Why during that fight against Good Belstead, didn't she let those yellow-haired brothers join in? She explains it's because she could handle it by herself. Ludian then asks how long she's going to keep living like this. What if, at some point, an enemy shows up that she can't defeat on her own? Even in that situation, would she still try to handle it without anyone's help? The protagonist knows she's acting this way because she hasn't yet met that kind of enemy, but sooner or later, one will appear. Honestly, I'm not sure what's happening here. Oh, I get it. He's giving her a moral lecture while she's eating her ice cream. Finally, he holds out his hand and says, "We're going to be comrades, you stubborn thing. When you're starving out there and not busy fighting enemies, I'll help you." The blush comes back to her face, and he remembers that in the original story, she opened up to the protagonist, revealing all sorts of things, that she wanted to be spoiled, that she wanted someone to walk beside her, and more. So he tells her he's here to be her comrade and support her with whatever she needs. Her hand trembling, she says his words touch her heart, but she didn't want to be his comrade. She wanted to be friends. Friend zone, everyone. All that build-up, just for her to ask if they can be friends. Fine, he's blushing a bit, and she's also looking like a tomato. Everything starts with friendship, Ludian says. Sooner or later, this will develop, and she'll ask him to take care of her. Anyone remember Rebecca? Yeah, she could come back into the story now to stir up some drama between the two of them. A little competition over our boy Ludian. In the next chapter, she says she was there not really to seek comfort, but to become even more motivated. That's because she knows that once she returns home, she'll have to carry all her burdens again. At least now she knows she can count on our boy to talk to whenever she has a problem. He says yes, that's what friends are for. But he jokes that he's not sure he can rely on her skills, and she's instantly ready to blow his head off, judging by her reaction. But then she relaxes, thinking it's been a while since she's had such a lighthearted conversation. She turns and says her brothers are looking for her, thanks him, says she had fun today, and waves goodbye. Meanwhile, Ludian's wondering how he's going to make sure she becomes very strong in the future. In the original story, she only got that strong because she worked alone. But he already has plans for her, while Yev is now asking for more ice cream. He's starting to realize this alien girl is a bit odd and orders another one. That's when Yev comments that the fate of ruin was narrowly avoided. Definitely interesting. Right away, Ludian realizes that this crafty girl knew Maria would have ended up in trouble in the end. But since she said it was narrowly avoided, he wants to know how to make sure those problems never happen. Obviously, Yev isn't going to tell him. Walking through the city, he's thinking about how he's now friends with Maria and feeling all cheerful. Suddenly, the boy's blushing out of nowhere. The confident psychologist act, gone, apparently. In the original story, she becomes extremely strong, gets rejected by the mages, then ends up falling under Amadeus' influence and is eventually hunted down. But this time, he wasn't going to let that happen. Asmodeus, Lady Deer, that guy Eligios, and another demon called Marbas. These guys are the cursed ones hiding in this city who need to be purified. The problem is the Amadeus. First of all, she's siding with the third prince and still trying to steal Lucila's position, and she's strong. So he asks Diablo if there's any chance he could beat these people. Diablo replies that back in ancient times, those three were already famous and powerful, so of course, after 1,000 years, they're way beyond the boy's current level. Even with parts of their authority sealed, they're still extremely strong. Naturally, the stronger our boy becomes, the higher his chances get. He's eager to grow stronger and put an end to this one's plans. Whatever Citri Belstead is plotting, he's going to counter everything. But his expression changes when she appears right in front of him. And next to her, oh great, it's Colleen telling our boy to bow his head because Lady Citri is speaking to him. It's been a long time since Ludian's been treated like this. He'd almost forgotten what life was like for a poor boy like him. Playing dumb, he asks, "Who's that girl? Never seen her, never heard of her." She steps forward, putting her magic orbs on display, saying she made a mistake in assuming he knew who she was. Her name is Citri Belstead. Bold as ever, the boy claps his hands and says she must be the one with that peculiar connection to the third prince, right? Obviously, she bites her tongue at that, saying those are unfounded rumors, all while wondering why this guy has the nerve to insult her in front of everyone. But he's going to keep playing the fool. He's just an ordinary person, so he doesn't have much to lose with her. Kalai and his buddies start scolding him, telling Ludian to respect her, saying those rumors make no sense. But our boy wants to know why Colleen is calling her our Citri, as if she's already taken control of the whole group. What's making him uneasy is the thought that the demon's communication network might already know about his involvement in all of this. She goes on to say she's recently transferred here, and now that Colleen is helping her get to know the place, he mentioned Ludian. Colleen keeps pestering him while Ludian is thinking that Colleen might actually be above Citri in authority, acting like some high-ranking noble to impress her. Then, out of nowhere, she gives him a sly, malicious look, saying she really enjoyed the stories Colleen told her, something about how Lord Ludian has done an incredible job conquering the dungeons around the city. That's when he realizes he's in trouble. She knows he was involved in the destruction of Castle. Trying to cover it up, he awkwardly says he only helped Lord Derek, the one who actually killed the boss and did all the work. And to keep Colleen from contradicting him, he says it was thanks to the legendary Colleen's help that he got the chance to prove his worth. With a story like that, Colleen obviously agrees, saying yes, he did far more than Lord Ludian. Citri now looks a bit unimpressed, wondering if this boy really isn't anything special after all. The boy is playing 4D chess here, but the persistent woman doesn't stop. She takes his hand and says she wants a moment with him, to hear every little story about what he's been up to. But he quickly shuts her down with, "I'm not in the mood." She's taken aback, but he just says he's too busy. Meanwhile, Diablo is enjoying the show. Then Colleen grabs her hand and tells her to stop wasting her time on this idiot. He has plenty to show her. Before she can say anything, the blonde drags her away. At least he was useful for that much. Ludian notices that the troublesome woman is starting to make moves. Right then, Eddie calls to him, saying she can sense one of the fragments he needs, one of his pieces, coming from that woman. This was information Ludian had absolutely no idea about. He remembers the moment when Eddie said he would need to collect several pieces, and that one of those pieces would make him stronger. He asks which piece it is, and Eddie replies that it's something called Eldorado Part 1. Apparently, it's basically like ChatGPT, because it's the part that holds the most information about the past and things like that. Ludian feels relieved that it's not a combat-related piece, which would make dealing with that woman much more complicated. But then Ivy explains that even though it has nothing to do with direct combat, it contains information on every type of magic and war machine. Depending on how the things stored inside are used, it could destroy 1 or 2 planets. That's when Ludian starts connecting the dots. Could this terminal be related to that portal that opened in the Empire? Since it's an item with such vast knowledge, maybe it's not a coincidence. And right then he says it looks like he's going to have to play around with Asmodeus. Next chapter, Luciel informs the 2 Keplers about Citri's entrance into the Academy. There was no way to stop it since the third prince himself made sure of it. To make matters worse, the Empire specifically requested that she be protected and not face any danger. Maria says it's a good thing they didn't ask Lucilla to take care of Citri, because that would have been a huge problem. Still, it's obvious this woman is here to cause her harm. Lucilla just says that if she wants to try, she can. That's when Ludian steps in, saying this is actually a good thing for them. This girl is the only adopted daughter of Gud, which also makes her the only person currently holding the association together. He had been wondering how he could get close to her when she's always at the prince's side, but this situation is perfect. It's the right moment for them to devour the United Theories Association, a group with more than 300 branches across the continent. These people control 20% of the Empire's logistics and possess enormous wealth. Elvin, however, points out 2 problems. First, how could they possibly take down such a massive group? Even if the Kepler family and the Delphion family joined forces, they still couldn't get close to the power these people have. Second, if Citri Belstead really is connected to the demons, why would she enter the Academy without a plan? Our boy already knows all this. He's certain she left someone in her place to watch over the Empire. But they need to take advantage of this opportunity. If she came all the way here, it's because they're having to adjust their plans. And if they follow the conventional approach, it won't work. Besides, they probably have some time to prepare. Elvin says it's likely 2 or 3 months. And probably Gud's death disrupted their plans, since right after that happened, she showed up at the Academy within a week. Ludian says maybe Citri took control of the company. Maria adds that the perfect method for her would be brute force. She probably wiped out everyone to take control. Ludian knows that's easy for her. Not only that, but the authority of the models allows her to perform brainwashing. With a power like that, organizing a trading company and seizing control is simple. Elvin suggests that the plan should be to free those people under her power and turn them into allies. But Ludian says no, they're there to devour. What's the point of freeing people who were subordinates? Elvin asks what he means by devour, and Ludian says he intends to swallow up the entire Theories Association. Elvin tells him to cut it out with that choice of words. Just say kill or take down. None of this swallow or lick nonsense. But Ludian is still saying he wants to devour the Belstead family. Luciella says it's madness. You can't do that now that Citri is in the city. But Ludian replies that it's exactly because she's adopted. Her inheritance was only granted because Gud had no relatives. The moment he handed over the souls to the demons, he killed all of his descendants. And of course, with the third prince involved, ordinary people don't stand a chance. But if there are no living relatives, could they just create one? After all, he has the ring that represents the Belstead family house. The Alphas ask if he really took it when Gus died, and he says yes. This thing is very convincing. Then he admits he couldn't possibly devour everyone alone. He's just laying out the plan. Luciella responds that even if he has the head of family symbol, it's still a huge fraud. He replies that they can simply have the prestigious Delphion family verify whether it's real. Navin wants to know what Luciola's decision will be. She says it's a good idea, which even surprises Elvin, who says he thinks it's a bit crazy. But now she's motivated, saying they're going to take down that association. Soon the newspapers start spreading the news. He thought they'd use some random person, but the one claiming to belong to the family of the late Gus is none other than Ludian himself. Everyone knows this will cause chaos in the Empire, and the problem is that if Ludian is actually accepted, the third prince will surely drop Citri completely. She'll lose all her influence. And there he is, the third prince, who even looks a bit like Kaline, fuming that the Delphians are going too far. Citri tells him to rest easy, and that she'll handle it. He nervously asks what she'll do, and she says she'll speak personally with Rujin. She pretends it's probably a misunderstanding they can resolve easily, but in truth, she's already studied Ludian's background and is eager to kill him. On the other hand, since he wants this family so badly, maybe she'll give it to him, obviously after making him her slave. The seductive authority she holds has clearly scrambled her mind. Dangerous territory here. Suddenly, she's right in front of Ludian. He turns and bolts. He knows he can't handle this. She says they're from the same family, and he laughs. She goes on acting all coy, saying the whole succession matter has become a mess, and that since they're close, they shouldn't be fighting. He laughs again, saying it's hilarious for her to talk about that when both of them are claiming the same inheritance. Then she opens her arms and says she can give him the position of head of the Belstev family if he wants, on the condition that he stays close to her. He asks if staying close is really what she wants. She's practically drooling, saying he's fallen into her trap and starts unleashing her powers everywhere. She tells him she doesn't just want the head position, she's sure he must also want to get rid of Luciola, so why not ruin her plans together? If he supported her, she'd make Luciola his slave. He'd have pleasure, wealth, honor, and anything he wanted. He says without hesitation that everything she's saying is pure nonsense. She's left stunned, not understanding. He asks if she wants him to repeat it. She steps back, trying to figure out how he can resist her. She had used the demon's authority, which is supposed to be absolute. Ada chuckles, saying that compared to Diabolo's attempt, hers was pathetic. Citri then demands that he tell her who he really is, since the only people her power doesn't work on are members of the dragon race or descendants of a god. He just says it's funny. Everyone keeps asking about his identity. He also points out that she talks a lot like Miss Casley. That's when Citri realizes it was him who broke the blood tomb. The problem for her now is that if her seductive authority doesn't work on him, she has no way to kill him. The cunning guy sits down and tells Miss Asmodeus to make herself at home. Together with Elagos and Marbus, they have been working hard to open that gate. Her anger only grows as she sits down, demanding again that he reveal who he is. Not only does he know her identity, but also the identity of everyone else involved. Ludian, however, says that who he is isn't her concern. He's here to get straight to the point. How about Lady Citri Belstev forming an alliance with him? After all, he knows that until the moment she opens the demon gate, everything that happens to her is insignificant. On top of that, it would still take at least another 3 or 4 years. She's getting angrier by the second now that he's even quoting dates. She starts thinking that no matter how strong he is, even if it costs her life, she has to kill him right here. He laughs, saying she's jumping to an extreme solution, but if she's in such a hurry, she can try. Still, the moment she made a move, everything she planned would be ruined. Finally, she gives in and asks what he actually wants. He says he's already proposed the alliance, and besides, she should know she was the one who stepped into his territory first. She has no idea what he means by territory, while he's clearly trying to play 7th-dimensional chess, telling her he doesn't care who she is, since he could wipe out her group anytime he wanted. He's not even worried about that so-called gate. The real issue is that the other kingdoms are facing problems too. That's why she's going to have to compensate him properly and agree to a non-aggression pact. Naturally, she asks what the price is. Inside, the boy is grinning. It's simple. She has to hand over the trading association. He knows it's financially inconvenient, but when the gates open, none of that will matter. On top of that, they're forbidden from touching anyone from the Delphian family. She asks if that's really all, and he says there's just one more thing. She should stop seducing Kaline because he's one of his subordinates and he doesn't want to see his friend's life ruined. He's going far to protect that blonde troublemaker, isn't he? Our boy's being a real friend here, even though that blonde definitely isn't. Granted, Kaline is probably already under the influence of her power, and that's not an easy thing to resist. Citri is trembling, unsure whether to accept or not. The problem is she has no idea what kind of seal could hold all this information, something no human should have. Ludian is already imagining her tied to the chair. She'd have no choice but to agree. And of course, she eventually says fine. In the name of the goddess of lust, Asmodeus, she accepts the terms. He laughs and she adds that there's one thing. She won't give up the third prince because she's invested too much time in him. He says that's fine. He couldn't care less about that guy. Since that fool abandoned Luciola, Ludian doesn't give him a second thought. He then swears that the Delphian and Iskar families won't interfere with the families hiding demons, and she swears not to interfere with anything he's planning, not even at the academy. Obviously, this would only hold until the gates opened. She asks the name of his group you already know. He says it's Adora. She then stands up, saying she knows they're being watched, and warns that his arrogance will one day come at a heavy cost. He tells her to stop being so aggressive. What if he feels like breaking this pact? She replies that now that the pact is sealed, he'll be the one to suffer even more if he does something like that. He hesitates for a second, and she leans in with that predatory look, saying she's looking forward to the day she can torment him for eternity. Then she leaves all demonic presence, while he thinks this bluff was worth it. 80 asks if he's really going to honor this non-aggression pact, and of course he says no. Demons and celestials are bound to keep the pacts they make, but he's not even from this world. Eddie makes a little horn gesture, saying he really is a demon after all, and he just agrees. The scene shifts back to that demon from before, asking her if she's lost her mind. But she tells him to shut up. She has no idea how. But that boy already knew their entire plan. He knew the exact date of the gates opening and even about Marbus's involvement. Considering that, they probably knew about the court too, which meant there was nothing more she could do. Close your legs, girl, what's with all that showing? Asmodeus is carrying a weapon there, not a small one either. Lord Eligios is shaken, not by her weapon, but by the fact that Ludian knew everything. She said that he was probably connected to some alien race or to a god, but the guy doesn't care about any of that. They can't just stand around and let him do whatever he wants. While this troublemaker knows so much about them, they don't even have a clue what his organization really is. Asmodeus, however, is nervous, saying they have no idea about his true power. If he's much stronger than they are, the whole plan will be ruined. He replies that she's the one who made the pact, not him, so he's not violating anything. She calls him a lunatic but says fine, only under 2 conditions. First, he must never fight inside the capital because win or lose, the entire plan would be ruined. Second, if he loses, he'll be exiled. He's startled, and she warns that if he doesn't accept these terms, she'll speak to Marbus and have him sealed away until the gates open. The guy says fine, he'll accept those cursed terms. She leaves in anger, telling him to just go ahead and start whatever he wants. Asmodeus may be a menace, but at least she's easy on the eyes. The scene shifts to the refined Delphion estate where someone tells the royal family that this is unacceptable and to bring Luciella in. It's the third prince, shouting at everyone while they try to calm him down, telling him he's crossing a line. I think that's Luciella's father who appears, telling him to stop being disrespectful and to come inside so they can talk. The prince is fuming, demanding an explanation from House Delphion, saying they'd better have a good one. I think that's Vincent speaking, telling the fool to get ready to explain himself. Then he comes face to face with Luciella, with our sly boy in the background. She greets the third prince with a smile, and he immediately sits down and asks what kind of joke this is, wanting to know why she threatened Lady Citri. Luciella says she has no idea what he's talking about. She's never even met that woman. But William claims that Citri revealed she met with someone named Ludian, and afterward gave up all her rights. That wouldn't have happened if Luciella hadn't interfered. She turns to our boy and asks him to explain. He introduces himself. I am Ludian Belstead. The prince says he's bold to call himself a Belstead. He must be asking to have his neck cut. But our boy remarks that the man clearly will never grow up. The prince immediately gets up, accusing him of picking a fight with the Imperial family. Ludian just asks why he keeps acting so carelessly, thinking that acquiring the trading company would be enough to replace the Delphians was pure stupidity. William tells him to shut up, saying he doesn't understand the power and political influence he holds within the Belstead family, and promises the boy will be killed. He adds that he preferred the Belstead's support because he didn't want to marry poor Lucilla. And I still don't get why she looks so sad. Girl, ditch this weirdo already. The prince steps up to Ludian, saying he doesn't know how he got the family's symbol, but you better hand it over now. Even though the Delphians are one of the top 3 families, they can't challenge the Empire. Ludian asks what he would do if the 3 top families were actually united. Suddenly, the door opens. Someone wearing a witch's hat walks in, saying it's been a while since she's seen the third prince. He asks what Grey Bellatrix is doing there. That family is like the Delphians, but in the magic world. They're the rulers of magic. And the person who was also part of the protagonist group in the original story, known as the God of Mages, was this guy here, Grey Bellatrix. As long as he doesn't turn into one of those people constantly clinging to the protagonist, begging for attention and following him everywhere, things will be fine. We didn't see that the day before he had gone to speak with Luciella, telling her that now that they had formed a partnership with the demons, they'd managed to buy some extra time. But she said they were in serious trouble with this whole Belstead situation. Looking over the documents, he saw that, unfortunately, the Belsteads didn't have many properties left. He asked how that was possible, and she explained that it was obvious. Right after his death, everyone began looting everything they could. Less than 30% of what the man owned remained. Even with heavy investment from the Delphians, it still wouldn't be enough. So he said they couldn't risk her family's power, meaning they'd need to involve another house. He reminded her of what he had asked back in the dungeon, the thing about selling gold. When she asked what that had to do with anything, he told her they were going to bring in the Bellatrix family. We then see them arriving at Grey's study. Grey greets Luciella by calling her a stick, saying she's too skinny. My god, this mage lives in his own little world. Just like in the original story, Ludian knew this guy was full of himself, but no one dares criticize his personality because his skill is enough to shut everyone up. Luciella says he's as arrogant as ever, and he simply tells her to state why she's there. She immediately offers the Bellatrix family opportunity to take the lead position among merchant leaders. Gray finds that strange, knowing the third prince has his eye on that spot. And why they drew her with that peculiar shadow over her face, I have no idea. But she tells him circumstances have changed. Even so, he sits at his desk and says he'll have to refuse. There's a lot to gain from this, but he doesn't want to go against the Imperial family. She insists, saying that with the two of them together, even the Imperial family wouldn't be able to oppose them. But he replies that the odds are still 50-50. If she wants him to join in something like this, she'll need to offer more. That's when Lubian speaks up, saying he has something to offer. He shares a few gold bars infused with magic, explaining that their purity is very high. He's interested in converting them into money and wants to know how much they could offer. Gray picks one up and says a single bar is worth at least 200 gold, which shocks Luciella since 200 gold could buy an entire house in the capital. Gray remarks that not even the elders of the magic tower could get items this refined, so he asks where Ludian stole them from or where he got them. Ludian says they came from a dungeon, but he can't say which one. He wants to avoid attracting more interest from the Isker territory into raiding that place again. Gray says fine and asks if he's going to sell them, but Ludian says no. That's not the only thing he wants to sell. He then tells Adi to open the inventory, and suddenly gold coins start pouring into the room. The man is stunned. This all looked like magical metals and rare stones. Meanwhile, Ludian is thinking about how that wretched Caslay had really hoarded an absurd amount. Gray admits it would be difficult to buy all of this, since its value is equal to an entire territory, with farmland included. But of course, what Ludian really wants is the Bellatrix family support. Gray then says he'll try to persuade his mother. Ludian replies that he'll have to keep pushing, and then shows him a book. Right away, Gray recognizes it as something written by the legendary Archmage Caslay. Ludian asks if he wants it, and of course, Gray says yes. This is a book that could unlock centuries of knowledge. Luciella, looking uneasy and glancing away, asks where he got that, and he tells her to keep quiet. Back in the present, William says that even with the families united, they wouldn't have the authority to overthrow the Imperial family. But Gray cuts straight to the point. He says the opponent isn't the Imperial family, it's the third prince. After all, the third prince should already know perfectly well that the Bellatrix family supports the second prince. That's exactly why they reached out to him, and he says he's looking forward to this partnership. So the third prince would be better off forgetting about the skinny one and enjoying his days with his other woman, because otherwise they won't let him off easy. The fool leaves, saying this matter is far from over. Gray then turns to our boy and asks if he enjoyed the performance. Lubian thinks to himself that things are finally starting to get interesting. At the same time, Gray is already walking off, saying he needs to get back to work. The guy's productive. Ludian thanks him. He's eccentric, but worth the trouble. Now he has to console the odd one standing there with tears in her eyes. I'll never understand. Did she really like the third prince? What's going through this girl's head? Apparently, she really did have feelings for him. She's remembering how, as a child, she was always adventurous, while he preferred modest women. But she never managed to be that way. Ludian likes to picture that giant image of her. Luciella, the commander, charging at the front lines. Clearly, she was never born to be a modest woman. He reveals that the Emperor once said that if Luciella had been born 10 years earlier, he would have married her. Honestly, with statements like that, the Emperor sounds like someone the Imperial FBI should be keeping an eye on. She's a bit surprised, but then she asks not to let herself get down. It doesn't suit her. She agrees, saying it really doesn't make sense. He tells her to go slap the prince, which makes her laugh. Our girl's acting a little heartbroken here, isn't she? She's crying over that prince, while Ludian's basically saying, forget the prince, be with me. You're so beautiful. Not much left for our poor guy here, or maybe there is. The fool left Rebecca behind to starve in the capital. What a disgrace. At the edge of a village, someone arrives saying they finally found a high-ranking demon named Iblis de Carabia. Apparently, he's an acquaintance of that Alex, and he wants to know who did it. The traces of magic had completely vanished, and he hasn't been able to track anything for a month. But every lead he's followed has brought him here. He knows that if he stays around, he'll eventually find the person he's looking for. Wait a second. He's arriving, and it's not in the capital. This is the old village of our boy. He's wondering why this place, which should have been attacked, looks untouched. On top of that, he knows Alex wasn't killed by Cato, but by an unknown individual. That's strange. An isolated village like this should have been destroyed by the cavalry alone. Something kept this place protected, and he knows that if he confronts the strongest person here, he'll eventually get his answer. And in the blink of an eye, he's behind Marco, who turns to ask who he is. The man seems disappointed, questioning if the dwarf is really the strongest person here. Marco goes to grab a knife, but in that same instant, the stranger grabs his face and orders him to be quiet and answer a question. What happened in this village when it was attacked? He releases Marco, who asks why he wants to know. He's already sure the stranger isn't from the Empire. Iblis says humans really do have trouble listening, then says fine and hurls magic, declaring he's no fool. A hand grabs Marco, and Iblis warns him to start speaking honestly, or the entire village will be gone before sunrise. and since it's just the two of them here, they're going to spend some time together. Marco decides he'd rather die than tell the truth. Iblis complains, saying he should have at least learned some form of mental magic by now. Now he's going to have to handle this the hard way. Marco is certain this is where he dies. But then our dear Rebecca appears, calling for the chief and asking what's going on. She's already got that dazed look in her eyes. The guy is confused, wondering why he didn't sense her approaching. He asks who this girl is, finding it strange. She gives off the impression of a high-level expert arriving, but her mana feels average, nothing special. She's staggering toward them alone, and he decides to be cautious, launching a few spells in her direction. And damn, she's pierced right through. What the hell? No, don't kill Rebecca like this, not when I just said our boy was starving back in the capital. Marco was shouting, saying he'll kill the bastard, thinking that in the end, she wasn't much of a threat after all. He lands a hit on Marco's leg too, but suddenly Rebecca is already behind him. I thought she was going to pull something off, but apparently he smashes her head into the wall again. He finds it strange that she's not even using mana to defend herself. Even so, his attack doesn't seem to be causing much damage. Marco tells Rebecca to run, but now the guy is intrigued. Her hair is changing color. He notices it instantly, but decides it doesn't matter. If he takes her head off, it's over. He sends an attack her way, but now it's her turn. She forms a ball of energy and starts absorbing his magic. He turns in confusion, and Rebecca is now fully transformed. The real shock for him isn't just that, it's the sheer, overwhelming amount of mana she has. He feels himself being completely drained and decides to go on the offensive. He unleashes another barrage, screaming for her to die, but a barrier appears and blocks everything. Once again, he thrusts his hands forward, firing off a beam of light straight at her. But everything explodes and she remains completely unharmed. Rebecca realizes there's some strange power flowing through her body. And then, just a flick of her hand, and she's already at his neck. Black, demonic wings burst open in the sky. She grabs him, draining him until he's almost nothing but skin and bone. He screams that this is impossible, but she tells him it's absolutely possible. One glance into her glowing red eyes is enough to see the demon inside. Iblis realizes she is part of Diablo's aura, which doesn't make sense. She's supposed to be just a normal human. All the throne demons should have been sealed away long ago. He can't believe a creature like this has been hiding among humans. I don't know what exactly happens to him next, but she collapses to the ground, crying and calling for the village chief, saying she broke her promise. She had promised Ludian, but she failed. She's shouting, her aura flaring outward, saying she wants to see him now. Marco is completely confused. What's she talking about, seeing Ludian? He's in the capital, so how would she even get there? But she says she can feel exactly where his aura is, and it makes sense. She awakened with the power of the sword. She's going to follow that power straight to him. She apologizes, saying she has to see Ludian. Let's go, Rebecca. Time to fly. Spread those wings, girl. The village chief just says fine. He'll take care of things here, and she should go. Off she goes. The scene shifts to the Belsted Empire region. A butler introduces himself as Jester, saying he works for Lady Luciella and will be serving Ludian from now on. Our boy is now of Viscount. Just slipped that ring on and it worked out perfectly. Jester says he'll be managing the Belsted family's merchant house. All he asks for are accurate records of every transaction. And here comes Gray, the oddball who said he wouldn't stick to our boy, already showing up red-faced. Get out of here, man. Meanwhile, he's happily surrounded by the trolls, with that waifu in the background drinking away with her little bottles. Our boy asks what Gray is doing there, and Gray says his mother sent him with a message. Ludian knows the legend, Sonia Bluefield Bellatrix, a towering mage. Gray explains that she didn't seem very enthusiastic, at least not until she saw the items Ludian offered. In his memory, she agreed almost immediately, already eager to see the Imperial family go up in flames. The only catch is that she doesn't know the exact value of that book and wants to speak with Ludian to compensate him properly. That's because these kinds of books carry an extremely high price tag and are sought after by every magic academy. Regardless of how complex a spell is, its foundation lies within books like this. That's why she wants a moment with him after the banquet. Gray then leans toward him and says that if Ludian has any more secrets or incredible items, he can hand them over too. Ludian is about ready to smack him. Some time later, he goes to meet Sonia Bluefield herself. She's there looking every bit the mage, holding a bottle and saying that if he's truly a Viscount, it shouldn't have a better wine than hers. Ludian immediately understands why Gray always looks like a drunk. Sonia congratulates him for becoming so famous in the capital. He's relaxed until she suddenly says she'd like to marry Gray to him. Too bad her son's a man. Oh, for crying out loud, I said the moment that guy showed up I didn't want him clinging to Ludian. The tipsy woman says selling her son wouldn't be a bad idea, it would save her a lot of money. But then she sets the bottle down and says enough joking. Time to talk about the book. She asks how much he wants for it. She's already verified its authenticity and knows it's real. A tome packed with ancient magical theories is incredibly rare. The problem is it's so genuine that she doesn't even know how to compensate him for it. She could pay its full market value that would bankrupt her family. So she asks if he's interested in any magical tools or artifacts. They have plenty of valuable ones. But the only type of artifact he wants is one of the 7 colors, and she doesn't have that. He says no and offers a counterproposal. He knows that the reason Gray became such an extraordinary mage isn't just his talent, it's also because the Bellatrix family has specialized in accumulating knowledge for generations. What he wants is for the Bellatrix family to help him become a great mage. Gray immediately tells him to wake up. He's in the swordsmanship department. There's no chance he'll become a great mage. Ludian says he feels like he has talent. Sonia also tells him to wake up. Magic isn't like swordsmanship, where you can simply train and get better. He should already know it's impossible and should suggest something else, because she's not here to play games. But Ludian insists he's serious, so she says she'll have to explain. Even if he were a prodigy in magic, if they started training now, it would take 30 years for him to become a great mage. And that's assuming he trained 18 hours a day. Mage productivity, off the charts. She says they could speed it up with an even harsher regimen. No sleep, perhaps, but it still doesn't make sense to her. It would be a waste of money. Ludian says he'll accept a program that makes him a great mage in 10 years or less. She can only think he's lost his mind. But of course, Ludian's suggesting this because Adi has already calculated everything. He says she can put a clause in the contract stating they don't have to pay him anything if he doesn't reach that level. And if her house isn't capable, he can always come up with another plan. That's the final provocation. She stands, telling him to leave the academy and register at the Tower of Flames tomorrow. She'll create a perfect plan to make him advance as quickly as possible, even if he has no talent. Not that she believes he stands any real chance. Right after that, he says tomorrow won't work. He needs to leave for a month, so they'll have to start after that. Gray tells him to stop saying things like that to his mother because she'll lose her mind. Sonia slams her hand on the table and says fine. During that month, she'll be planning his study schedule. But since she'll be personally involved in this, he better be ready for what he's going to go through. Gray feels sorry for him, saying he has no idea what he's gotten himself into. Sonia grabs her bottle, sits down at the massive table, and tells him he shouldn't leave the capital for a month. It's surrounded by demons. He simply replies that she's not going to get any information out of him. She glances at him and apologizes, saying she was just testing him. Then she comments that it's strange the Imperial family must know about these abnormalities but is staying silent. Not even when God died did they get involved. She also mentions she hasn't seen the first prince in quite some time. All of it very interesting. She then leaves, saying this information won't come for free. Ludian, leaning against the chair, thinks to himself that, as expected, changes were necessary. He casts a spell in his hand, summons a sword, and says he's become a superior sword expert in just 1 month. We see a bit earlier, he's training with Elvin. After dodging an attack, he's suddenly behind him and Elvin defends himself, asking how this monster got like this so fast. They'd only been training together for a month, yet he already seemed like a different person. He truly discovered he was a natural genius. Then bam, Ludian drives the blade in. What the hell? It was just training. Ludian asks if he's alright and Elvin says not to worry, it's not a fatal wound. Honestly, that stab in the middle of practice felt a bit unnecessary, but fine. Elvin praises Ludian's progress, but Ludian says he only evolved like this because of his physical condition, though he's sure he's about to hit his limit. Elvin, however, notices Ludian has even gotten taller. He's turning into some Jinwoo over here. Ludian asks if there's a way to evolve even faster, and Elvin tells him he's greedy. Unfortunately, at the level he's reaching, the only quick way to grow is through real combat. Ludian says the perfect place for that would be somewhere he could put his life on the line, yet always come out alive. Elvin says yes, but obviously a place like that doesn't exist anymore. He's heard they existed in the past, back when magic and science had reached their peak, but he waves it off, saying that clearly doesn't exist in today's world. Cut back to Ludian, who of course must know of a place like that. He then asks Diablo if he could recognize another member of the Seven Thrones. Diablo replies that if he met one, it would immediately turn into a fight, since they were never exactly friends. Ludian says they'll find out soon enough because he's keeping an eye on one of the 7 legacies, and of course he's not revealing which one because that would ruin the fun. Adi praises him, saying he's growing extremely quickly, but warns that he might be pushing himself too far. She tells him to slow down a little. Obtaining the legacy of the 7 thrones isn't as easy as he thinks, and he shouldn't be taking such a risk right now. But Ludian says taking risks is the most important thing. He made that non-aggression pact, but it's only between him and Asmodeus. He knows it won't last long. If he wastes time before launching his attack, he's going to be ambushed. Of that, he's absolutely certain. That's the like on this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers. Activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.